Good morning, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for February 10th, 2025. We have a few people that are absent tonight. President Bradford is not in town, and so we miss her, and Dave McFarland is not here tonight, so we miss him and hope he is feeling better. So we are going to start with audience communication, and I don't have anything for audience communication. Did anyone have a blue slip? No. Okay, we'll move right on into Committee of the Whole. And we are going to start with item A, consideration of candidates for 2025 MASB Board of Directors. And we talked a little bit about this at the study session, and each of us had some thoughts and some opinions. Did anybody have any further clarity on the people running for MASB Board? Mrs. Acosta.
I really just had a comment. I don't know if the rest of you received that email that there will be a panel happening tomorrow. And so I don't know if we wanted to hold off until we took a look at that.
Perfect, yes. That sounds good to me. Mrs. Burton.
I totally agree with that. That was going to be my suggestion. They indicated that they're doing interviews and they're taping them and they're going to send them out to every board member in the Tri-County area. So we normally get this prepared ahead of time, but I fully support your thoughts, Mrs. Acosta, that we just wait until next week, and that way we can all have at least 4 or 5 days to grab some time to take a look, because we came down to 3 folks that all look fairly closely qualified. So I would very much like to take a look at that interview before I make a decision.
Perfect. Okay, sounds great. And then we'll decide next week at the board meeting. Okay. Any other comments? No? Okay. We'll move on to number 3, Finance Committee. Mr. Johnson.
We do not have anything on finance, Mrs. Smith? Nothing this evening, thank you.
Okay, perfect. And then we will move on to Curriculum Committee and Mrs. Acosta.
There we go. Thank you. For item 4A, we have the annual education report, and we have Mrs. O'Brien reporting.
Good evening. You guys went faster on your one item than I was prepared. I knew I was going to be up quick, but you went even quicker than I thought. I am excited to share with you this evening this year's annual education report. This is a yearly annual thing we get to do. Currently, this is due to be put up on our website by the 18th of February. That's what's required by law. It opened right before December, and as I've shared in previous years, there's certain pieces of this that are required, that we must follow a certain template and put our information in. We'll walk through the whole thing. Each school has their own annual education report where a principal can share what they're working on, what some of their goals are, and then their data specific to their school. So each one of our schools has one. They're posted on their website and then on our district website. We take their information and then we summarize it in our district one. So we'll kind of walk through it a little bit. So the first page is the letter that we need to follow by the state of Michigan. This template is laid out with certain pieces that explain how an annual education report is organized, its purpose, so it's one of the state of Michigan's accountability measures. And then we have personalized this front page a little bit in the 3rd and 4th paragraph. We write a little bit of an explanation to a community member explaining what the first section is and what the second section is. That's not part of the template, it's part of Livonia Public Schools. And then just what the different data points are that we're going to have in our annual education report, which would be our assessment data, some of the accountability measure, teacher qualifications data, and then any NAEP data. So this report is this year's, so we name it as our 24-25 annual education report, but it's based on 23-24's data. So all of our state data is from last spring. Some of the data that is current year would be our parent-teacher conference from fall data is current. So last year, we did not have any schools participate in NAEP. So we don't have a NAEP score for this year. Previous years, we have.
What is NAEP?
So that's the National Assessment Program. So they call that the nation's report card. And they we get a letter that says we need to test 50 students at Churchill High School, 4th graders at Hoover Elementary, and 6th graders at Riley. So they inform us, and then we have to gather a random sampling of students and have them take that test. Then the nation's overall score is based on randomized students from across the country.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So on page 2 is really where we get into some of the accountability under our annual education report. So there are ways that the state supports a district that's not meeting their goals, right? So not hitting their student achievement goals. So there are levels of support. So they have a targeted support and then a comprehensive support. And you may get a letter at an individual school that says you've been identified based on these data measures that we report on. We do not have any schools that have any of those labels. So we have no schools that are targeted or comprehensive. And so it's based on, targeted is at least one of your underperforming subgroups. So one of your subgroups is underperforming. And then also, then they could be in the same level as the lowest 5% of students in the state from 21-22. So that particular data point, they use a average of the previous years, and so they haven't re-averaged that yet. So we're still using 21-22 as our data point for targeted supports. But again, we don't have any schools that have any subgroups that are that low. And then comprehensive is any school whose performance is in the lowest 5% in the state. And we don't have any schools there. So this paragraph is required. It explains this, and then I write that last sentence that says none of our schools have been given that label, just so that anyone who's looking at it, they know that right off. They don't have to sort through the table of all of our schools. So questions on that? Okay. So then the next several pages are each one of our schools. There, we have to list whether they have a label, which all of them will now say no label identified, and then their key initiatives to accelerate or improve achievement. So each principal writes that cover letter. They have a section where they say what they're working on. I take what they say they're working on and we put it into our district report. One of the things that you may have noticed in previous years is some of the elementaries were very similar because we try to be working on the same things, right? Although we have different data and we have different kids, we all are working on our Tier 1 instruction, our intervention block, right? So supporting some of the students. This year, all of our schools are working on their 3-year school improvement plan. And so this has been a part of it, is for them to dig a little deeper into their data and look at what they've written in their letter and say, is this current? Because now you're setting goals for the next 3 years. So a lot of these letters have been updated with what the school is reflecting in their school improvement plan that they're setting in the spring this year for the next 3 years. So this has been, for me, who likes school improvement, this has been an enjoyable change that everyone's digging in, because now for the next couple of years, this will be very similar, because we want to stay the course with what we're working on, give schools to improve on those areas. And so this is that year of digging in deep and saying what's worked, what hasn't worked. So For the several pages here, this is what each individual principal has written, what their school is working on. One thing I'd like you to notice is really looking at our secondary schools. If you think of the support and focus we've been putting in with mascot time and some of the other supports, those schools have really dug in and done a lot of looking at what they are offering their students and what they want to continue to support with. So it's not like boilerplate information here. It really is personalized by each one of the middle schools and high schools. And they spent a lot of time on it. And I'll give you some time, we can talk about it at the next meeting if you have questions about these, but if you turn to page 13, this is the section of our district profile. So this is kind of like by the numbers. So it has how many students we have, the schools, the grade levels, and then the number of employees we have at each across the district. So these are all of our district numbers. And so each year, when we pull this data, we work with the Human Resources Department to update our numbers for this section, for all of our employees, all of our students. The next 3 pages is our mission, our shared vision, and our collective commitments. So we put that in our annual education report because that's what drives our school improvement process, that drives the work of what we do. So then when you get to page 16, that is the page where we talk about school improvement. So we list just a little paragraph about what school improvement is, how we use it. We list our shared vision specifically with our priority areas, and then what our district goals are. So again, our district goals have been based on what the schools are working on and what our district priorities are. So when each one of these school improvement plans are shared with me in the spring, then myself and my department, we look at what does that mean for all of us as a district, and then also keeping in mind where we want to go with our own district priorities. So our academic goals are written for 3 years, just like theirs are, and we typically have a measurable objective, one for all students to reach state standards, and then a measurable objective for our subgroups to continue to grow, to close the gap. So as you can see on page 16, we have our reading and the beginning of our writing goal. And then on page 17 is our mathematics goal. One of the things you have to list 2 years worth of goals. We do 3-year goals, but we left our other goals in our annual education report just to notice that we really shifted that idea of reading and writing into our content areas. So we don't have a specific science goal or social studies goal because we expect reading and writing to be a part of all of our content areas. So hitting that goal, that helps a school to all the teachers working towards that improvement on hitting the standards.
Mrs. O'Brien, I understand that. I'm wondering what is the thought process of our science and social studies departments? Are they understanding, buying in this? Do we get pushback because there aren't specific science or social studies goals, or where is that all shaking out?
So I don't get pushback. I think as a school works as their school improvement team, they have those conversations about how students are achieving in science and social studies. But we've really focused on the last couple of years with our purchasing of new curriculum resources, the amount of reading and writing we're doing in those content areas. So I think, and I can't say for sure, I'm not on every single team, but the belief system is that it helps support everyone to work together on those goals. So we have common summative assessments in science and in social studies where they're looking at their core content, knowledge that we want kids to know and be able to do. Those are aligned to the MSTEPS assessments. But then also we have a reading and a writing portion in those CSAs so that we could look at how our students are using reading and writing in order to show what they know in science and social studies. So I think it's an orchestra of looking at how students are doing and then setting the goals for that. So they know how they're doing on their content in their classes because we have those common assessments.
Okay, good.
And then our goal is for them to perform on their state assessments, whatever age grade those are, whether it's 7th, 8th, or 11th.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. At the end of page 17, we do a little bit talking about how our vision, oops, sorry, go ahead.
Mrs. Frank had a question for you.
I just have a couple of questions. Can I go back?
Of course.
It was just interesting what this said about the MACAP program and that it is Frost's.
Can you tell me what page you're on?
Yep, 7.
Okay.
That Frost overall enrollment has dropped, meaning the MACAP program is a bigger percentage of the school, leading to the gap being wider at Frost, which is just interesting because that number stays the same, correct? The Frost program will stay, or the MACAP program stays the same year over year.
The
And so
number
if
of students?
Right,
I believe so. Essentially.
okay. So that it's just saying that the gap is getting larger between that top percent. Is that what I'm reading? Is that correct?
So their general education enrollment has declined, which
Yes.
that is true. So therefore, the gifted and talented program is a larger percent of their overall score.
Right.
And the gap between that larger percent and the general education students have grown because when you average it and the MACAT student scores are more of it, you see a bigger gap.
Yes. So is there any, that's just kind of the way it is, right? It will always, I mean, we want to improve, but, yeah, I guess is this just noted here as a note? They're not doing anything about it, basically.
So if it's noted here, they are doing something. It's something they're looking at as one of their data points as to a why.
Okay.
But when you think of Frost's MACAP program, so the top 10% of our district students, if they're in that program, compared to a smaller and smaller group of general education, it is going to look harder.
Right.
When we look at our common summative assessment data and our district data, we separate the two groups out so that they can have those conversations. Otherwise, they may say, all the students at Frost are achieving at this percent, and just like any high-achieving group of kids can pull your score up higher,
Right.
they want to look at that and make sure that what their general education students are doing is meeting the bar they want.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Another question
Yeah.
is on page 13 where it says about 85% of our certified staff has advanced education degrees. Certified staff is teaching staff? What is certified staff? I should know that, but
Yes.
teaching staff?
Yes.
Because we,
Administrators would be a part of that, so anyone who has a teaching or administrative certificate.
and we don't even do teaching who doesn't have a certification.
No, teachers have to have a certification.
It just means they have a master's or above,
Okay, okay,
85%.
okay, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Good?
Thank you. Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we were at the bottom of 17. So there's a little bit of information about our District Vision Forward team, our QUAR review process. So again, when you think of our school improvement process, we try to, connect what we do when we set goals to all of the things that we are working on. And so this summary of our district school improvement, you can even see in any one of the goals, will have a end life at the end of this June. We'll review how we're doing, and then we'll reset those goals. So page 18 and 19 and 20 are what our goals are for each content area. So that's a requirement of your annual education report. So our curriculum coordinators review those every year, what the K-12 goals are for each content area. So then on page 21 is when we report our assessment data. So we are required to report minimally our state assessment data. We report also our district assessments because that's part of our school improvement process. So we want to report it all. So I'm going to just walk you through what is here. So we start with our district assessments, our young 5s and 4-year-old preschool benchmark assessments. So there's not a score for last spring. So as Jackson closed and moved to Livonia Early Childhood, and also because we knew we were doing the deep dive during this school year, Dr. Dodge, she didn't have young 5s. Well, she did have young 5s last year, so we did not collect this information from them. We will begin to collect new data from our preschoolers moving forward. And then our young 5s will be a part of our 6 schools where those programs are at. That'll be a part of their data profile as those students, because they'll be Hayes students or Hoover students like that. They'll be a part of their school. So then the second set of data is what we collect for kindergarten. We typically collected just letter ID as one data point, and you could see that in spring of 2023. As we have moved to using Orton Gillingham, it collects letter identification as an uppercase and a lowercase, and we no longer collect rhyme. So rhyme is not a part of our Orton Gillingham past assessments. So you can see that we didn't collect rhyme last spring, but we collected our letter ID for upper and lower separate, and then we collected letter sounds.
Was it a different assessment in 24 than 23 for letter sounds?
Yes. So it is the Orton Gillingham past assessment.
So does that indicate the significant shift from 23 to 24? It's because it was a different assessment?
It could. I think last year was the first full year for K-2 teachers to use Orton Gillingham. And then, so that would be the first year they've given those assessments in that way. Our letter sounds assessments was a district-created assessment prior. So then the third set of data is our running records. So we have teachers read with their students throughout the year. We do a formalized Fontes and Pinnell running record at the beginning of the year, and then teachers do running records when they're doing their small group instruction groups. And so these are the percents of students who are at grade level at the end of the year. Yes.
Can you remind me what running records means?
Sure. So a running record is when a teacher reads with a student and identifies what a student does when they struggle with a word. So it's keeping track of how many words a student knows in a passage, but also identifying what a student does when they don't know a word. So how do they sound out a word? What do they do? Do they guess? Do they skip it? So then there is a mathematical formula that they do in order to determine whether that book is too hard for them instructionally the right amount of struggle or too easy for them. And so you can do a running record formally, and we have our Fontes and Pinnell kits, which we used for years, but you can do it with any book. You ask a student to read approximately 100 words, and a teacher just keeps track in her notebook of what a student does with that book. So it's a way for them to see how they are doing if they're not at grade level, how they're moving towards grade level. And the information that they gather when a student struggles is something then instructionally they can support that child.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So then the next chart is iReady. So iReady is our district benchmark assessment. We also use it as a screener to help us with our intervention groups. And so we've been giving that assessment for many years. And these results are the percent of students who are mid or above grade level. So mid is at grade level at the end of the year or above grade level. So if I'm a first grader, if I score anywhere from mid first grade and beyond, then this is the percent of those students. And then the next page at the top, on page 22, that would be our middle school percent of students reading mid or above on the iReady. So at middle school, there's less student engagement with iReady. And we currently have a committee looking at what assessments we give and why. And one of the things we talk about with middle school particularly is the number of times they've taken it by the time they get to 7th and 8th grade. And so that same online assessment, sometimes there's not the engagement because this doesn't represent what our scores are on other assessments. We have some schools who really put a strong focus on our iReady days, and then we have schools that, give a good typical focus on it, but some work a little harder to get kids engaged in taking it. So it is something, when you look at our scores, particularly at middle school, what is the right way to determine, what would be a district assessment to determine how students are doing on grade level with reading? And we're having those conversations.
I'll let you guys ask questions first. Go ahead. Mrs. Frank.
Yeah, I just wondered if that was the same with grade 5, 4 and 5 and 6. 4 and 5 especially.
Is the trending downwards as the
Yes.
grade levels increase?
Yep. So I think we, since COVID, we've used iReady for a lot of important data decisions. Some of the conversations we've had is we're shifting to using it at elementary to determine interventions, what students need more. But we recognize that as kids get older, they're less engaged in this online assessment. So it is a benchmark that's approved by the state of Michigan. So we are required at K3 for the third grade reading bill to choose one of 4 assessments. This is our assessment, and as we've talked at this table many times, we give it kindergarten through 8th grade. And so a student, by the time they're in 8th grade, has taken this test no less than 21 times if they take it 3 times a year since kindergarten. So what is the best way to determine this? And different buildings, again, as we're setting goals, are really looking at this particular data piece because it's important for us to have an assessment that gives us this information. But if we are saying what I'm saying right now is, so we recognize as kids get older, they're not as engaged in it, then is it the right assessment?
What other options are there for different assessments?
There are 3 other state-approved ones for elementary that we can choose from for the 3rd grade reading bill. Another piece that we're looking at, again, is with the dyslexia bill that's coming out, they'll be giving us a set of assessments that we'll be required to choose from. iReady could be one of those, but we're wondering if that would be the right point with the state re-looking at what we're giving for us to then look at maybe, how we use it and what assessments we're giving. The other piece that Mrs. Rousseau is doing is really looking at this compared to our CSA and our state data. So we had a pretty tight alignment with iReady and our MSTEP scores, and our gap has widened. So our scores on this, in some schools, were outperforming our spring iReady on our spring MSTEP. And so it used to be, when we first got it, that was one of the reasons we really liked it. But we have seen more difference between the 2 assessments over the last several years.
Mrs. Burton, I know you were
My
waiting to
questions
speak.
have all been covered now. Thank you.
So I guess, would we consider breaking up these assessments and to create some kind of, to try to eliminate the testing fatigue and assessing with another assessment the 3rd time or the 4th time or something of that nature, just to see. But I'm looking at, even with all these scores, the 5th graders in 2023 that then became 6th graders in 2024, there's a considerable jump in their scores. So, I mean, I don't know what that means, but that seems promising to me. But just, what other things can we explore to have a more reliable assessment?
And that's exactly what we're doing this year, is really trying to dig in and say, what are we using it? What does it tell us? Is that accurate? So if our end goal is for our students to meet the state standards, which is assessed by MSTEP and PSAT and SAT, then if this is no longer as strongly tied to that, then what should we be looking at? Are we giving it at the wrong time of the year if we're going to use it? Should we be doing something different to help kids set goals with it? So those things are things we talk about. And then each mid-year and end of the year, we meet with iReady, and they share with us the national norms and the state of Michigan norms. And we are above the national and state averages on these. So when we look at this percent, we're outperforming other states, other districts. And so then what does that percent mean if we're doing better than others, and this is a number we might like to see stronger, better than it is? So that was the question I asked back to them. Just last week they were here, is can you give me the breakdown of other districts in the state? So they give you a state average, and we're performing above. Therefore, what's the alignment again with our MSTEP? Because I'm missing that from my vantage point.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. Do you know what percentage of districts across the state use iReady, the same ones that we're using?
I do not, but I can find out.
Mrs. DeCosta.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Burton.
It is frustrating as educators. It's frustrating when we have to use certain tests, and it's frustrating, as you've politely alluded to, middle schoolers and high schoolers just simply don't sometimes put the effort in that we would hope that they would. If they know certain things are not associated with their grade, then I was unpleasantly shocked to hear my daughter come home one day and say, "Mom, when we're testing, some kids just fill in bubbles. They just want to get over it, so they just fill in circles. And I said, what? No, this is important stuff. We need this information.
Yep.
And she's like, Mom, you got to know that's happening. And it is frustrating, but that too, as disheartening as that is, it's a true statement about some of our secondary students, and not our secondary students, just secondary students, period. So I appreciate the schools that are making efforts toward helping students set some goals so it's a little more meaningful for them personally, because we do have to recognize that this doesn't always reflect exactly what they know and exactly what we're teaching and exactly what they're learning, because some of it is just some teenage attitude creeping in that I wish wouldn't be the case, but I believe that that's true.
Yes. And fatigue maybe with the same assessment, or the time of year, or the number of assessments at that same time. So we're looking at all of those things, the calendar of assessments, what we use that data for, and is it something we should be looking at adjusting?
And I'm sure too, where you're looking at, can we double dip with some of these assessments? Can we choose an assessment that is an appropriate one, but might count for 2 of our requirements or 3 of our requirements, as opposed to just 1 per?
Yep.
And therefore cutting down on the number of tests we have to give.
Yep.
I'm not sure how possible that is, but throw that in there with the ideas.
Mrs. Frank?
Isn't it true that we can't use the state test because it takes so long for them? This is a basically immediate test, right? Once they take it, they get the results.
We get the results right away.
And the state test, it takes so long to get it back. We can't tailor instruction to because it's the next year, basically, after the students have moved on to the next level, that we get the, right?
Right.
Isn't that why? I mean,
So we test in April,
yeah.
and we get the results typically in September, October of our state assessments.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do collect, you can collect an early look at how students do, but you have to collect it by student. And then, you don't have where the state level is and the comparison to other people, but we can get an idea of how our kids are doing. And we have begun to do that, and that's where we're noticing the gap between the 2 assessments, because we can gather as kids finish M-STEP, looking at how many students are, proficient, maybe not showing whether they're advanced, but just a cut line, and that's where we're seeing some differences here. Okay, so then Math I Ready is the middle part of page 22. And then we give COGAT at 6th grade. So COGAT is an ability nationally norm reference test. We utilize the results of this test to place kids for accelerated classes and moving from 6th grade to middle school. But then parents get these results also. So this is the one time a year that we give that type of an assessment. Page 23 is our state and national assessment. So it is, because we didn't have any NAEP assessments this time around, this would be our M-STEP and our PSAT and SAT. Last year, we started collecting and comparing our PSAT 8, which is the state assessment for ELA and math, but then we also give PSAT 9 and PSAT 10. So as a part of our school improvement plan, looking at how students progress the 4 years with the SAT suite of assessments. So those, the big ones that are aligned to the state is PSAT 8, and then SAT 11 is the other state assessment. But 9 and 10 we utilize to see how our students are growing from 8 to 11.
I mean, if you look at the PSAT 8 and compare that to the iReady 8th grade scores, that would not be the expectation at all.
Correct.
In a favorable way.
Yes, our
Yes.
our PSAT scores are higher by a lot.
By a lot. Any questions?
So then the last section of the annual education report is, we report on the percent of attendance to parent-teacher conference, so that's required as a part of your annual education report. We break it out for elementary and secondary, mainly because we have a difference in, most parents go to all of the parent-teacher conferences at elementary, and at secondary you have 6 students, or 6 teachers, and so they may go to only a couple of their students' teachers, so not as many for all courses. So that percentage is different. We're required by law to put the percent and the number of people who attended. The next paragraph is just about all the wonderful things we do in collaboration with PTA and PTSAs in our schools, and that is a part of who we are, and so that is something we add into our annual education report under this section of home and school partnership. It is as powerful as parent-teacher conferences. And then the next part is specialized programs, so you have to, by law, report what programming you offer that is different at elementary, middle, and high, and so that those paragraphs explain the magnet programs that we offer our students. And then Title I, what we qualify for here in our school district. The next section is parent involvement, and you're required to list your policy for parent involvement. We have a link on our district website, and so that link is at the district and at our schools, so then we just refer to that board policy. And then the last page is really looking at the data in a different way, directly from my school data. So probably 10 years ago, we had to then have another 30 pages with all of the charts directly from my school data. Now you're allowed to put the link at the bottom, and if you go to that link, so our M-STEP and our PSAT and SAT scores would be there. Our accountability, they'll give you our teacher qualification. So again, the idea of the certifications and master's programming that our staff has, any NAEP data, and then the civil rights data. So this section is required to have in your annual education report, and then the link above or at the bottom takes you directly to our page. So this will be downloaded into a PDF. It's loaded onto our district website along with each one of the schools. And then if you go to a school's website, the link for that school's annual education report and the district report is available to any parent. It also, a parent can come into a school and request a paper copy of this report, and a school needs to print it off for them.
Questions, comments?
Snap on what we've already thrown at you throughout.
It's great. It's great. Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item.
Is this coming to the board? Are you presenting this next week?
Sorry. Item 4B is limited schools of choice, 105 and 105C for 2025-2026. Mr. Green, take it away.
Good evening. Hi,
evening.
everybody. Thanks for having me back this week. As you know, last week at our study session, we discussed the history and status of our limited schools of choice program, also referred to as 105, 105C. We'll have a few slides that we'll be showing in a few moments. Ms. Jenkins will be helping me with those. During that meeting last week, I was grateful to have the opportunity to review the history of schools of choice within Livonia Public Schools and share various data points that led to our proposal moving forward for the upcoming school year. This is something we do every year at this time. Before continuing to discuss the recommendation for next year, I would just like to take a few minutes with our viewing audience to provide an overview of limited schools of choice through 105, 105C. So next slide, that'd be great, thank you. Livonia Public Schools has offered limited schools of choice since the 2014-2015 school year. So if someone came in as a kindergartner that year, they'd be 10th graders this year, in case you were going to ask me that later. Limited schools of choice through 105, 105C allows local school districts to enroll non-resident students and count them in membership without having to obtain an approval from the district of residence. Limited schools of choice applications are accepted for a limited number of seats and at specific grade levels. Limited schools of choice are open to residents of Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, Monroe, and Washington counties. In other words, local districts within Wayne County or those next to our county, like Oakland County. Application windows for limited schools of choice are open for 30 days, after which, if necessary, we hold a publicly recorded lottery as needed for certain grade levels. Shortly thereafter, families that are accepted through schools of choice, our pupil accounting department would notify them to begin the registration process for the next school year. From there, the elementary department, in partnership with the human resources departments, plans our processes for placing those students, and we use great care for that process. So if we can go to the next slide, thank you, Ms. Jenkins. We just talked about the difference between 105 and 105C. 105, again, is within our intermediate school district. 105C would be those intermediate school districts that border Wayne County. And on the next slide, I just want to go over one data point this week. We went over a lot of data last week, but this year we talk about how many schools of choice students we captured last year, which means that they applied during the month of March, they were accepted, they registered, and then they showed up in our schools the first day of school and are with us. That number was 82, and you can see that 5-year history since 2021 school year. And if we go to the next slide, this is going to be what I'm going to be asking the Board of Education to consider per our discussions last week. So as we discussed last week, during the 24-25 school year, we captured and enrolled 82 students, which is around $787,000 in revenue. In addition to this revenue, these schools of choice placement actually help rebalance our class sizes and fill gaps at our various locations without negatively impacting class size. So as we do our staffing for the district, we might see that we can't only staff a second grade with 2 teachers because it would be too high of class size, but when we go to 3, it makes the class size a little bit smaller than maybe in other schools, so we can strategically place a couple of schools of choice students in those buildings without adding additional staffing. So it's one of our foundational principles when we place limited schools of choice students in each of our monthly staffing cycles we do each spring. Another reason is we have seen no kindergarten overflow and no combination classrooms the last 5 years in our school district, and this is another technique that we can use to help prevent that from happening. I was in a split class when I was a kid, but they're just out of fashion now in the 2025. But as you know, each year we do conduct this internal review. We take a lot of time. We review this in cabinet. We come to you in our study session, and we bring forth this recommendation for next year that as a result of this, we would like to recommend offering up to 50 seats total through the 105 and 105C Schools of Choice program for grades K through 6. This would include our magnet programs of Niji and Webster ACAT, which have some additional testing requirements. So we have the number I give you, we have to take up to that many. We can go over if we have slots, and we have a lottery where we put people on the wait list. So we have to guarantee a certain number, but we don't have to go above it if the numbers and the enrollment and the staffing is such that it gives us a cushion. And then with Niji 70% or so of their students are from out of district because of the unique magnet program, the dual immersion program there. So that's why we go for 105C, because we would need to take a lot of our students at Niji reside in Oakland County. And then for Webster ACAT, it's very strategic. They're finishing their testing right now. For Livonia students, we would look at a limited number of seats for those students as well. Our primary focus in the general ed classrooms would be, as we said last week, kindergarten and first grade, but we offer a seat at each of those other grade levels so we can make sure we can accept students at Nijiro and at Webster. So that's why we say K-6, but our focus for general education, students in our buildings that are not our magnet buildings will be focused on K-1. We believe one of our foundational beliefs is that we start them younger. We come here as a younger student. It also allows for siblings that are automatically to the front of the line. So if a student last year was accepted in first grade and they have an incoming kindergarten student, they get to be at the front of the line per the state rules on schools of choice. So what I would ask is that, as we talked last week, as I give you this summary for the audience tonight, you would, if approved by the Board of Education on February 18th, because we're meeting not next Monday, but we're meeting next Tuesday for the Board of Education meeting, the application window would then open on March 1st, close on March 31st, so it's a tight timeline like we talked about for families. They have to know when this application window opens and when it closes. And then on April 11th, we'd have our lottery. And I would ask this to be a voting item at the February 18th, 2025 Board of Education meeting. This is a team effort. We talk about this in cabinet with the Board of Education, Ms. Mazur in pupil accounting, Ms. Herbeck in my office. It's a real team effort. Ms. Arbo, we all put together a lot of data, look at the numbers, look at our why, and we feel very comfortable bringing this recommendation forward for a vote next week. And that is the summary of 105C for this year. It's a big topic. We spent a lot of time on it last week, but I want to make sure if there's any questions that I can answer those today.
Any questions? Mrs. Burton?
Yes, talking about the number 50, and you mentioned that includes MACAT and Nijiro. So this number of 50, we can exceed the number, correct?
Correct.
But if we have 50 applicants that fit into the proper grade levels that we're looking to fill, we have to accept up to 50 students. Is that a correct understanding?
If we say 50, we take 50.
Okay.
So we have to get to 50. Between Nijiro, Webster, and what our data showed that we brought in at K1 for last year, 50 is a very safe number. But yes, we can go over that number if we have slots available and interest at those grade levels, like you said. So for example, if we place, let's just put Nijiro and Webster over here in this bucket, because their seats are very limited based on spacing.
Right.
And there's testing requirements for both schools. So let's say we place 10 over there and we have 40 more to place. We're going to be focusing on K1, and we may have a sibling in second grade that we can place as well. If we want to go, because our birth trends or birth rates are a little bit lower and we have some additional spaces in kindergarten that won't swing our percentages too high because we went over those last week, I could go over 50. But if we say 50, we got to get to 50. If we have that many that are
If
interested.
we have that many
Yes.
applicants. If we
We
had
will.
49, well, I
Yes,
believe we
yes,
will also.
yes.
But if, just so I firmly understand it, if we had 49 applicants, we would take 49
Yeah.
students. Okay, but we can go, now, is there a maximum on this if we say 50 students?
We would put them on a wait list, and that would be up to our discretion. But one of the things we talked about in the past is we're not going to artificially raise class sizes. We're not going to create additional classrooms for this. That's one of our guiding principles. So, and that is something that Ms. Keats and I and HR do every month starting in February. We start doing a staffing view of the following year, rolling up our students. So we have a pretty good idea of that number. Kindergarten is always the tough one, and I'm going to get to that in a few minutes because those are our newest students. But we've had some really good success with limiting this, understanding the why in our families. Livonia is a very attractive school district for our families. As we've spoken about this topic in previous years, many of our school of choice families make a transition and become residents of Livonia over time. And so that it's a wonderful thing on a limited basis.
Okay. Yeah, I am in favor of doing this on a very limited basis. I certainly would never be in favor of just a wide open door, because that can change a lot of things in our district, and it can take away from our students who are in our district. But to utilize this kind of a tool at our disposal in order to bring in kids and fill some pockets where we may have holes otherwise, while still not diluting the offerings for our students who live in Livonia Public Schools, District boundaries. I think it's a really terrific thing.
Thank you.
I would add, in addition to maintaining our staff, right? So this is another tool to, assure that our staff can remain in their positions.
Absolutely.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta. Bill, I'm a bit confused. The slide said up to 50 students. Then how can we, if that's what we approve, how do we go above that?
Yeah, this is a flippant strategy. If you think about previous years, we would say up to, but not to exceed 150 in the past. We knew that we weren't going to get that many applications. So the approach was, let's put a big number out there. But we knew historically from what we would capture that we weren't willing to go higher than that, and we wouldn't get that many. Miss Major in pupil accounting, since she's come over, and her knowledge of what she did in her other districts was to set that number at a lower level based on recommendations. Now, we could have said 75, but to understand the concept of we have to go, maybe it's maybe it wasn't articulated clearly, but we have to go to that number, but can go over that number. So she felt more comfortable, since she's been here, to set the bar lower in case there was some trend where we had hundreds that wanted to, and then we said we were going to take up to 165, and we couldn't commit to that as a school district. We were safe in the past doing that because we knew we would capture that many. Because if you recall, in previous years, we would give you how many registered, how many how many showed up. We'd have a big retention loss, and we'd only get about half of that number of seats if you looked at that one chart. But on this side, it's a flip of a concept. So not having it wide open, but having it limited and setting that number lower. Because we have wanted to scale back on this too. We used to take more at older grades as well. And so having that number that high would make us really be bloated at K1, because our emphasis is on the lower grades. So we don't feel comfortable putting that big number up there.
Okay.
But yes, we can go over it, but, and I'll probably have to correct that for next week so it's clear on that slide. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
And
Mrs. Burton?
Mr. Green, again, we wind up capturing approximately 2/3 of those who actually apply. Is that
Traditionally, yeah,
correct?
that's about where it is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. By the time they actually.
And there's reasons why. Some are applying in other districts. Some have made the move. Some had a sibling that didn't get in, so they say, well, my third grader that I applied for didn't get in, but my first grader did, but I'm not going to have one child attend Livonia and one our home district. So there's a wide range of reasons.
Okay. Okay. And when will you be able to get back with us on how these numbers look?
I can give you regular updates at our study sessions or at any time, and we will start that pending your approval next week. That application goes live March 1st.
Okay.
So, and then we'll get those numbers by the end of business on March 31st. So we'll have an idea of how many have applied and where that looks like it's falling.
I'm a little bit concerned with our target number being a little bit lower this year, that may deter some folks. Do you have that same concern? Has that been topic of discussion? Because I don't want to deter folks.
When we've even scaled back in recent years and we didn't have it as limited, we do get a majority of our applications in K1. I think families feel very much the same way, as that, we're rolling for 4 years in our local district. We don't want to pull our child now. But before their children actually go into the school, some say kindergarten's fine if I go to kindergarten here, but I want to be here in first grade, and others are like, let's get in at kindergarten right now. So we tend to see most of our applications at the earliest grades,
Okay.
independent of the number we offer.
Mrs. Oquist wanted to comment.
I would not be surprised, Mrs. Burton, if that is the case. I do think that people look at the number, and I don't know that Mr. Green or I would know the answer to that yet. We have decreased that number over the past few years. We really are trying to, I believe, message that it is is indeed a very limited number. So it will be interesting to see if this does deter families that have multiple students, thinking that the likelihood of them getting all of their students in without having to be in the lottery may not be possible. But we really are looking to lessen that number overall. So I think that is a bit of a question mark, whether or not people seeing 50 versus 150 may have some folks saying, well, I may just go to another
Yeah,
school
that's
district
interesting.
because they take 600, or they take an
Yeah, I certainly don't
unlimited
wanna do that.
number,
Yeah.
right? So I certainly think that that may be the case. I will say that we get the majority of our applications in the first few days that we're open. We have phone calls and people asking when this window will be. Obviously, we never know for certain until the board votes, but once the board votes, then that information is made available. So we should know pretty quickly if that's indeed the case. You can also have another window at a later time. If you choose, you can have a window in May, or in June, or in August. So I think if that were problematic, we could certainly, the pupil accounting manual does allow you to have another window, I believe as little as 15 days and as much as 30, if I recall that correctly. So if we see that we're seeing a significantly lower number of applicants, and this has affected it, we could always go for a second window.
Okay. And again, Mr. Green, the verbiage on this is going to say up to 50 or a minimum of
Yeah,
50?
I'll-
Because as I'm hearing, I'm reading it saying up to 50, and
Yeah.
I'm hearing it saying a minimum of 50. Then those are two different
Yeah, I think
things.
Ms. Major's gonna settle on, we'll be offering 50 seats. And then knowing within the pupil accounting manual, we can go over that. But I'll clear that language up with her, because I wanna make sure I'm exact on that.
Okay.
Because that language is contained within the pupil accounting manual based on state law. And when I've worked with her in the past, each district has a little nuance in how they word it. But, what we want to make sure is we're not trying to deceive anybody. We're just saying, this is how many seats we're offering. But we have the internal control that if we want to go, because it's a limited schools of choice, if we want to go above that, we can. So I will make sure that, because I shared this verbiage with her before I put this slideshow together, and she says that was perfect, so I want to make sure it's still perfect, because it is a question that's maybe a little different than in past years for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And since you are double checking that verbiage, can you send that to us before the
Yes,
board meeting? So
absolutely.
we make sure that we know
Yep, absolutely.
solidly what we're going into
Absolutely.
to vote on? Okay. All right, thank you.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. Mr. Green, out of curiosity, is there any point in the application process where we ask potential families if they are applying to other schools as well?
I don't think that's part of our application from when I reviewed it this year, but I do know we have a lot of conversations in pupil accounting when folks come in, and they do mention quite often that we were so happy we received your call because we had an application in Plymouth Canton or Wayne Westland. So, folks are typically shopping in multiple locations, but I don't have any of that data exactly. But it's definitely a narrative that's shared quite a bit, as is the narrative I shared earlier that that we're targeting Livonia, the community of Livonia, to live. And this is something we're trying to do now, so to buy us time till the house we want opens up next year, or the market cools off, or whatever it might be.
Mrs. Burton?
One other question for you regarding Niji Iro. Because Niji Iro is unique in a lot of ways, but one of the ways is that we have some of our students who are coming here as their family transplants from Japan for a few years, usually for a parent to work. If this is part of the school of choice window, how is that handled, or is it handled at all? If we have, say, a family moves into to Michigan in October or
Yeah.
December or January, how does that handle then?
So we used to actually do multiple windows, as Ms. Oquist was, Superintendent Oquist was saying, but what we're doing now when that happens is our pupil accounting person basically has the other district sign off. They never say no because on Niji students, because they know they want this unique experience that their district can't offer. It's different than if they say, well, we have a very comparable program in our district. So that has been the strategy instead of having another window, because the other window gives you only a certain timeline and then assumes you're going to get a burst, but they come at different times.
Right.
And then we also have the ability to say, well, if you take 2 more students, you're going to put your class size too high. So you shouldn't take any whether they moved here or not. But often each year has a little bit of a cushion that we're able to do that. And I think 3, Ms. Keats might know the answers, but I think there's 3 that we've accepted in this fashion since the start of this year.
Okay, and that's because as you're saying that, it dawned on me, because the school of choice that we're discussing right now is for students who can come without the signing off on the sending district. We could take a student, for example, that needs Euro situation at any time
Yeah.
with the consent of the sending
Yeah.
district. Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Green, and that will go on for a vote on Tuesday. We'll move on to item 4C, Early Childhood Center 2025-2026 registration updates. Mr.
Okay.
Green.
We're going to have the slideshow come back up. Besides, we can go to the next slide. Besides Christmas, this is the most wonderful time of the year, is March in elementary. We can go to the next one. We're going to take a look at the elementary early childhood offerings, if you want to keep going forward. Keep going. There we go. All right. Early Childhood Center offerings last week. I'm just going to go over a few slides, but I want to remind the viewing audience, last week we had the opportunity to kind of reflect, have a little nostalgia, talking about how we launched our new Early Childhood Center this year over there on Newburgh Road. It's been a fantastic launch. So grateful for everybody in our community that's helped make that a possibility. It seemed like a dream at one time, and then it went into like, this is a real thing that's going to happen. And then we just saw that kind of just come to fruition last year, and it was just so exciting. And so this year, our team at the Early Childhood Center don't have to worry about packing up a building and wondering what their new space is going to look like and all of those other things, but rather we really have been able to just focus in on our programming, and we've had some really nice successes. We talked about last week that we're going to continue to roll with what we're doing at the Early Childhood Center. We're going to add an additional fee-based class next year of preschool, but we feel very confident in the offerings that we have. We're at pretty good capacity right now. We're looking at, these are the programs that are on the screen for the public. An email just went out today, I believe, to our LPS and returning families, and there's some open houses that are taking place for new families coming up on the 25th, I believe, at our Early Childhood Center, and it's just a fantastic place. So if those that are watching tonight have not had a chance to tour the facility, I know Dr. Dodge would love to do that, but we offer a wide range of programs and services from early on to fee-based preschool, fee-based childcare, our Great Start Readiness program, which you hear a lot about in the news, which is our 4-year-old preschool. SAC runs out of the Early Childhood Center, but serves all of our elementary buildings. And then we have Early Childhood Special Education Preschool, otherwise known as ECP. We love our acronyms in education, don't we? And then we have other Early Childhood Special Education Services. Ms. Jenkins and Ms. Thompson have done a great job with the team over there updating our website. So all this information that you're seeing is currently updated, and other parts are updated daily as soon as we have other information. So that's usually the best starting point for families, is to take a look at the website. If they need questions answered, we have a great team over at the Early Childhood Center that can direct them to the right programming for their child. So first up is SAC, and here's some important registration information for SAC. We have summer SAC registration beginning on March 5th. That's going to be held at Riley Upper Elementary. We moved to Riley last year. I don't know how many years, but I feel like it was about a decade at least. We had summer SAC over at Buchanan, and the why in that was Buchanan was one of our few buildings that had air conditioning. Well, we now all have air conditioning, aren't we lucky? And Riley just seemed to work because it had some additional space. It had some additional resources. It was centralized, and that was a great launch last year for summer SAC over at Riley. So that registration begins on March 5th. And anything with SAC and any of these other programs, as Ms. Burton had said earlier, I'm more than happy in future months to give you some additional data on comparison numbers from SAC of last year to this year, and how the registrations are going. So like we did last year at this time, I love giving you updates monthly on how all of those things are going as we move forward. And then it's March 18th, and that's returning SAC families make a decision whether they want SAC school-age childcare for next year. They have to decide, because on March 19th, LPS employees are needing SAC can register. So I wanted to say the why on these two things. This is a tough conversation. March 20th is new families, and so we had this conversation a couple years ago when we talked about kind of thinking about how we open up certain dates. And so registration for returning SAC families was important, and we changed it to they couldn't go part-time, they had to sign up for 5 consecutive days, and that really made a lot of folks have to make a decision whether they wanted SAC, because some of our full-time families were being squeezed out by so many part-time slots, and that was equitable, and that brought some new families into SAC. We also agreed and made a commitment to say, so we need people that work for us to have childcare too as a job retention strategy, because folks are making a lot of different decisions now in the employment world about where they work and why they want to work somewhere. And one of those reasons is childcare. And also SAC. And so we said LPS employees, that is the why that we're going to jump them ahead of new families. So we very rarely get that question, but I'm very comfortable in our office, and so is Miranda, articulating that, so is Dr. Dodge, is that's the reason, that's the why that you see LPS employees bumping ahead of new families. And then registration begins for new families. So wherever you are, wherever you go, we always have a little more of a need in morning care, and we always are looking for SAC instructors. They're a wonderful group of people. It's a tricky shift because you have an AM portion and a PM portion and an after-school portion. So I do some recruiting at the local colleges to try to help out. Ms. Jenkins is a master of marketing, and she works that as well, trying to get the interest out there. We would definitely be able to open some more slots for morning care if we could get a little some more help. But we have a space issue. We're doing pretty well with that. We have some satellite locations now where for example, Hayes students go to Cooper because it wasn't big enough. It's condensing our resources. And Randolph students have been going to Rosedale for the last couple of years. Roosevelt students have been going to Riley, and Webster PM have been going to Riley as well. And that's helped consolidate our staffing and offer more seats, actually, by closing a few locations. So SACs are coming up soon, everyone. It's a great thing, isn't it, that we offer this in our school district? I think sometimes we forget to just kind of say that publicly. Like, that's not our core mission, but we believe in it strongly to help families with child care and before and after school care. That is when Ms. Smith and Ms. Keats and I looked at other districts, that's rare that school districts are involved in that. I think that speaks to our history, and that speaks to our commitment to our families. And so as we move forward, child care from 8 weeks to 3 years. 8 weeks, isn't that something? And those are the dates there, March 11th, registration. And you'll see this mirroring SAC. We have registration beginning for returning child care families, and then LPS families, LPS employees, needing child care. And then registration begins for new families requesting child care. We acknowledge we do the best we can in this area for our community, but we also acknowledge that we have to build strong partnerships with other child care facilities and child care providers across our district, because there's a need for that, and high quality child care is really important. And so we're grateful that we have that opportunity to still offer that in Livonia Public Schools. So those are those dates. Again, check the website for those viewing at home. Football season's over, everybody. It's time to focus on 2025-26 registration. And then we have our preschool options. I will imagine that at a future meeting, I'd like to dig a little deeper into all of these different classes with you to give you the breakdown. I'm not prepared to do that this evening, but all the different slots like we did last year, how many 3-year-olds, how many 4-year-olds. If you recall, we did that. We went over how many sessions. That'll be on our website. But here's the registration information for fee-based preschool. And then we have the Great Start Readiness Program. This has been a big win, too, of our Early Childhood Center being built. You will recall that GSRP was located at Garfield Community Schools. And with the Early Childhood Center opening, they were able to come over to the Early Childhood Center this year. And again, it's just great synergy when you have the different staff members working together and having all those supports located at one spot. So this is a little bit of a different timeline. The application window opens on March 3rd. And then it's a little bit of a longer timeline because we wait on state approval and the governor signing off on the budget for GSRP. But pre-registration already has begun on this. And we're going to run 5 classrooms next year. That's the game plan. Okay? All right. So that is a lot of information. and a very exciting bit of information for next year. And I'm not sure if there's questions, but I'll entertain them.
Questions? Mrs. Burton?
First off, that was a lot of dates and a lot of information. So for our folks at home who
Yes.
may be looking for this, where can they easily find all these dates on the website?
Absolutely. So if you go to Livonia Public Schools website, and we have a link at the top. So first of all, there's a lot of splash images, and I'm not sure, Ms. Jenkins, if I'm saying the right lingo, but splash images of like registration flyers and dates to register. That a lot of that is contained on our news, district updates, on our front page. If you go to schools and you go to early childhood and you click on our early childhood webpage, it's broken down all there for you. And then for parents, there's a tab under for SAC as well. So, and then we have just great team here from our front desk here at central office. I send every year at this time a pretty long email to all of our buildings, educating them. So if they get calls, they have the talking points to point parents in the right direction of where to go, where to register, and where to find those dates. So I think between our e-blasts, our website, social media, our schools having those talking points, I think we feel pretty confident pointing folks in the right direction.
Okay.
But it's exciting.
It's very exciting. I'm excited that we can offer so many different things for our little ones. Have we found that a one-day opening for our returning families and then one day for our staff before we open it up entirely is enough, or do we need to look at making that perhaps a 2-day window
I know.
for each one of those steps?
And if Ms. Smith or Ms. Keats want to chime in, but in our meetings, so what we do up to this, so like before we come to the study sessions, we start having pre-meetings with the Early Childhood Center staff back in December about all these dates, what are the trends. You know, last year we said, let's see what the data, where the data points us in our offerings. I know folks don't like to file their taxes on time, but folks know these dates. Like
Well,
like
that's what I
I
wanna
feel
know.
like, yes, they know when these dates are and they're ready to go. They're ready to
Okay.
apply, and I have not heard that they needed additional days. It's pretty quick, and then
Okay.
if they wait too long, then there's a lot of, why am I waiting? Why am I having to wait? You know, so
Okay.
they make this decision pretty soon.
Okay, as long as
Yeah.
it's working
Yep.
well, that's great. And then
It's
one
a great question, though, because I want the board to feel confident that we are always analyzing our processes. We're always reviewing these things to make sure we're not missing something that's out there.
I'll also say the email that went out to staff today was very detailed and was very clear about what those timelines are. So it does give a few weeks' notice for people to get their paperwork together, to get their necessary preparation, to be able to get that information. So it is a great question. I would agree that folks definitely have that date circled on their calendar, but the fact that they're also told well in advance that they have this opportunity, it doesn't mean that they can't register later,
Right.
but that they are more likely to get a spot if they do that in that time frame.
Okay, and I imagine our current families, who will then be returning families, are given ample email blasts to let them know.
Yes, every
Don't
weekend.
forget this day.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then one thing I was really excited to hear about is that we were opening up a new preschool room, you said. How many additional preschool classes will that allow us to pick up? Because is it gonna be for a full day? Is it gonna be for half day? Because if it's for half day preschool, then we could do an additional morning class and an additional afternoon class.
Was
See where I'm
that,
going?
was that 2 sessions, 3 days a week, Allison?
It was and I think it was definitely for the 3-year-old,
Mhm.
and so it will be multiple, classes then that'll be offered, and I can't remember if it was AM, PM, or minimally Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and a Tuesday, Thursday.
25 to 30 more
Okay.
children we can have
Okay,
this
that's
opportunity for you.
excellent, because the facility is so fabulous. Our staff, of course, has always been fabulous. But if we can offer that to more of our families in our community by
Absolutely.
opening up another room, all the better. So I'm thrilled. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. And this was just information only, correct?
That's correct, thank you, I'm sorry.
We'll move on to 4D, Young Fives in Kindergarten 2025-2026 registration updates. Mr. Green.
Okay, I love it. Told you, it's the most wonderful time of the year. So you recall back in the day, February was kind of the launch for kindergarten registration. It was February 1st for a long time. And, you know, folks changed. The days of everybody lining up at their school, waiting to register their kindergartner, you know, that world's no longer part of what we do. And so we were analyzing this registration tracker every year for quite a few years, and we noticed we were just not getting this big burst in February of registrations. We were seeing folks had just begun having habits that they were waiting a little longer. So we just looked at everything, and that's why you'll see March is really kind of like that push for everything. And so we changed that instead. How did this affect our kindergarten registration data last year? And it was a positive impact by moving it to March. We had more concentration in March. We were able to have better data for staffing for kindergarten. We weren't getting this bit by bit in February that didn't really give us any direction for staffing. So we said, why don't we just wait till March. We have a bunch of different reporting that we do for second count day in February for our teams in the buildings, because for our K-4 buildings, it's a lot of work, because they're doing a lot of the registration work in partnership with pupil accounting. So we moved that to March, and it just worked out great. So moving forward, if we could show that slide for our viewing audience here, we are going to have March 1st again this year. On the next slide, begin our Young Fives kindergarten and kindergarten registration. I'll talk about Young Fives in a moment. April 22nd, historically, long before I was in this role, we had a kindergarten information night. That's just been that goal is really to bring families in that night, build that relationship, start that relationship. I always love that night because you'd ask them to raise their hand. How many of you, is this your first child at kindergarten? How many is it your second? The veteran parents were so relaxed. The first time parents in kindergarten was so nervous, but it really remove some of those barriers and help them build that relationship with their new families. And then we don't stop there. That builds into our kindergarten roundup and Young Fives roundup, where we then take a look at the students and give them experience in the school. And I have to tell you, my friends in K-4, they do so much more than I even did back in the day. They do popsicles on the playground. They do so many activities even before the first day of school. So it's really, if you think about it, it's the relationship begins in April for the following September or late August, and it is a wonderful thing. But it's a lot of work, and so we have to be very precise in this, and so we want to make sure our families know when these dates are. And so for kindergarten, what happens is in the buildings, they get all these registrations. Some families have already made a Young Fives decision because they know their child falls in that range. They'll register for that. But then we do some outreach to families, before April 22nd and after, to say, boy, your child falls in the Young Fives range. We have this new 6-location full-day program that has had a very successful launch this year. What says you? And we educate them up with our principals and our ESTs to really try to help them understand, is this the option for you? If they're born after December 1st, we push them to, not everybody knows those deadlines like we do, but basically September 1st to December 1st, you have to file for a waiver to attend kindergarten in the state of Michigan. They're accepted, but we're trying to really look at that age range and say, what about Young Fives kindergarten? How does that sound? Would that work? And it's a parental choice, but we do try to do some educating on that. And then if they're born after December 1st, we push them towards our preschool programs, because a lot of families get confused about that deadline and then wait too long for a preschool opportunity. And then we look at the traditional age of July and August. That was the old Young Fives kind of model. We'd zone in on those 2 months. They're eligible as well. And some families have made that decision up a long, long time ago. And then where they're spacing, we have had a few students come into our Young Fives this year who were born. They'd be considered a little older, like May or April, but there was great rationale. There was seats. We didn't bump anybody out, but it definitely goes by an age first. And it has been a great launch this year. We're looking forward to seeing what it looks like coming up for next year. But it's very exciting. Then what we do is our goal is to have the same 6 sites for next year, but we take that data and we're going to work hard to make sure we can fill those 6 sites, because we have to see where the data guides us, and we'll keep you updated on that. And then kindergartners, Ms. Jenkins, what year will they be graduating if they're registering for kindergarten this fall? Do we know that?
2038.
2038. Okay, well, that feels good for them. But that is very exciting, and, COVID took us back a few minutes on our relationships and ability to connect with each other, but this is, it can't be oversold, or it's so important to start right there. The great thing is we've seen a huge expansion of pre-K, so we have a lot of relationships already established with a lot of our families through our other options that we just talked about. So it's just the best time. If you were a K4 or a K6 principal and you go to visit the kindergarten rooms, now the young 5 rooms, it's awesome. So we're excited and welcome to our incoming families.
Thank
And
you.
that's just information only.
Thank you. Mrs. Burton, did you have a question?
Yes, can you tell me what's the difference between the kindergarten parent information night and the kindergarten roundup?
Yes. Okay, so at parent night, it's basically, now we make accommodations if the children come, but it's for parents only. And we have some great kindergarten videos. I don't know if you saw the one that Superintendent Oquist did last year. It's out there, and it's very well done. And, again, I'm going to reference Miss Mazur in our pupil accounting office. She had not seen that video, and she said, I wish I had a child that I could send to Livonia Public Schools after seeing that. And so that's really just a night to say this is what kindergarten's about. Our K4 team have a lot of collaboration, and they work on a slideshow that's very common where they highlight certain parts of the kindergarten day. Each building has a little bit of a different wrinkle, but it's really welcoming you into our building. This is kind of what kindergarten's all about. Some of you may have questions whether your child's ready. Some of you may have questions about young 5. Some of you may be wondering about buses and the lunch program. And it's really to try to get them to know we're here to answer all of those questions. And we're going to be with you on this voyage moving forward. And a lot of teams put together things of, your child's even going to change from this April until next August because they're only 4. And, if you look at their timeline of life, there's a lot of growing they will do in those 5 months. And so really it's a lot of parent education about the school, about our beliefs, our priorities in Livonia. And then kindergarten roundup traditionally is bringing the kids in, and they used to cry a lot more. Even my last few years as a principal compared to my first few years, I think they all cried in the early days, but now they don't cry as much when they're coming for kindergarten roundup. They're pretty independent, and that's a lot of group activities. We have them, our kindergarten teams all have strong, as you heard Miss O'Brien and others talk about our PLTs, our professional learning communities. We don't have silos of kindergarten teachers in our buildings doing different things. They're a team. These are all of our kindergartners, and we work on welcoming them into the building. We do some fun activities, and then we send them on their way with what's next. And that could be, like I said, we do a lot of events in August on the playground, and then we all hands on deck. If you are in a K4 building, in the fall, those first weeks, it's all hands on deck. And by the way, it's mostly in kindergarten. So that's kind of our onboarding. And we're always looking for feedback from our families, but mostly for our new families that haven't had children in school, it's making them feel like it's going to be great. And it's going to be okay, and as one of our principals say, we got this. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Green.
Okay, thanks for the time tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
We'll move on to item 4E, LCTC Engineering Lab Furniture and Technology Purchase with Mr. E2. Good evening.
Last week at the study session, I was able to bring forward to you a notification in regards to Livonia Career Technical Center and the hopes to update and upgrade their engineering design, engineering program lab. It's something they do almost annually at this point. The last couple of years, they've done the computer security and computer repair program lab, and they've done the graphic design lab as well. So this is kind of like next on the docket from that standpoint. But Ron Wilson is our engineering teacher. It's the Engineering Design 1 and Engineering Design 2 program. And this would be updating and upgrading that engineering lab. And there's 2 separate quotes within your packet there. The first one is with Interior Environments, and that is to purchase new desks, chairs, drafting tables, makerspace tables, stools, and bookcases. And in your packet, you can see one of the gives you a blueprint of what that might look like. The kind of layout for the lab itself is in there. Part of it is those drafting tables. Those are the white tables that are in there with the drafting stools. And then you have the traditional desk and chairs as well. Something that's unique is the makerspace tables, which is just a handful of them, but that's where students can work across from each other in kind of a smaller space as they're tinkering with their engineering designs and so on and so forth. And then, of course, some bookcases as well. But that's all through interior design, and that is contract pricing, so we would not need 3 quotes. And that came in at $60,558.52. And then the second quote is for the actual technology and the software, looking to upgrade that with the workstations, some curved monitors, keyboards, and mouse pads or mouse pros. And this is through CDWG, and that would total $57,475.08. So the total cost for updating the lab would be $118,033.60, and this comes through the 61A1 State CTE Categorical Fund. And again, this is through contract pricing.
Thank you. Questions? Mrs. Burton?
Yes, I noticed we have a 10% contingency on this. I don't remember if we've had a 10% on our furniture purchases in the past or not, but can you address that one for us?
So the 10% contingency is for final design, finishing selections, quantities, or upgrades that may occur. So that's
Okay.
built into the total quote from that standpoint. So they just do a 10% contingency in case anything changes from now or from your approval until we actually implement.
Okay. So I know with our construction, frequently it's like more of like a 7. Is that 10 even rolled up a bit in case we decide we want
Correct.
more for, more of this desk, more of these chairs, et
Yeah,
cetera?
if we adjusted more drafting tables or something like that. Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mrs. Frank?
So it's not firm yet what we're getting, or like there's still some wiggle room on what we're getting, or?
There could be.
that what you're saying?
There could be. Once they come in, once we move forward, if we are approved and we move forward, they'll come in and really look at that space and maybe tinker a little bit, move some things around. And between Ms. Gray, the principal, and Mr. Wilson, the teacher, they may decide to bring in a couple extra drafting tables, remove a couple desks, or pivot in one area to another area. So, and then also with the finishes of what they are purchasing.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Looking forward to seeing what this looks like once it all comes through. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that closes out the curriculum committee report.
Thank you, Mrs. Acosta. Thank you. We will turn it over now to Building and Site with Mrs. Burton.
Thank you. First item on our agenda tonight is item 5A, which is the transportation routing software. And we'll welcome Mr. Francis. And Mr. Weber's here also.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Glasses, yes, I do. Okay. So last week at the study session, we went into a little more depth than what I'm going to today with regard to the routing software, simply because we had a presentation and we were talking through it with the board. But per your recommendation, we wanted to have the hordes of folks that would love some of this stuff to have it out there. So we're going to do, I'm going to run through some of the items. So it's a full package as described with multiple items. The company is called TransFinder, and our transportation department currently is using software to route students. And we do some things with regard to, say, field trips and whatnot by hand still. So we really have been looking for something that would update quite a bit and really give some power to efficiencies when routing, whether it be traditional routes for the schools in the morning and on the runs home in the afternoon, or field trips or athletic runs, et cetera. So TransFinder is the company that we landed on. We had a small team from transportation, IT. I was involved as well. We met with some companies. We talked about what they can offer, what costs were, and what our needs really were. And before moving forward, we also, our supervisor of transportation had gone to a few different districts who are using this particular product. And the main portion of it is really their routing, the route finder. They call everything, because the company's called TransFinder, as in transportation. Forgive me, everybody, I'm going to say the word finder quite a bit, during this, because they've named all of their sub items as well with the finder. But their main item is this Route Finder Plus, and it really uses the mapping area and the power of AI combined to efficiently create routes that are the wisest choice with regard to getting all the students from point A, B, C, D, et cetera, at the drops, and then at their final destination and back. And the efficiency is really trying to get our drivers, because we have, as you know, and most school districts have experienced shortages of drivers. So the more efficient our routes can become, the better we can serve our students, and the staff that we have can go even further, if you will. So the heart of this is the route finder. It wants to optimize the routes. It wants to help us reduce costs by consuming less fuel. As you know, we have 3 different types of fuel buses that take 3 different types of fuel. We have diesel buses still, we have gasoline buses, and we have the propane buses. And it really, one of the big keys with regard to that, because our team in the transportation department spends their summer, even before summer starts, working on those routes for the coming August, September, et cetera. The power of the software, which we don't have right now, has the ability to not only make efficiencies in the routes, but also if you have a change, it can figure out to say, you know what, this is how you should route this. If you had to add a stop somewhere that we didn't have this year, it will give it, because it has the power of the entire map and the AI, and this is just how it's created, to say the shortest way to go between point A and point B with all these stops in between is this. Right now, we do most of that by hand. And even though the team in the office knows this area, knows our routes, knows our schools, knows the neighborhoods, they start railing off street names and corners, and there's a dead end on this one, and they know them all, but it's still having that backup of the power of the software to say, here's the most efficient run. So that's going to be a game changer for them as they build the routes going into the 25-26 school year. One of the other pieces that we're adding on is something called Viewfinder. And Viewfinder is a web-based tool that we can get live tracking. So if I asked for a report, I can get a report right away. If I got access to see where the buses are, because our buses all now have GPS on them. So you can ping where the locations are, just like you would when you have GPS on your vehicle or whatnot. So the reports can come in real time. We can have visibility. We can have the office staff are the ones that are probably going to use this the most, but there might be times where we know it's a day that might be a tough weather day, or it might be a day that we're a little short on drivers, and we wanted to see in real time what's going on and how they're getting to the schools, et cetera, perhaps in a snowstorm that started, or a heavy rain, et cetera. So the Viewfinder gives us internally the ability to ask for and get answers very quickly because of the tracking. There's another item, and I'm just going to jump because we're talking about the tracking, and I'm skipping one real quick, but the Stop Finder. And the Stop Finder is something that we have seen some other districts use, and this is an app that parents can download on their phone, and they can track their bus. And again, it's because the buses have the GPS on them. With the app, you can then ping that GPS signal, and the app can then give an estimate, just like if you put into your Google map or Waze, how long is it going to take me to get from here to the store that I'm going to. It's basically looking and saying, well, you're going 45 miles an hour and it's still 3.2 miles away. So it gives you an estimate of whereabouts or the timing that you get there. So with the cellular power or the Wi-Fi power of the app on your phone at home, you can check to see where your bus is. You can also set it up to give yourself alerts. So that's why it's called Stop Finder Geo Alerts. You can sort of set an area to say, when the bus gets into this spot, it can ping me on my phone and say, I know what that means. It means you got 3 minutes, let's go. We got to get out there because the bus is going to be here soon. So this is something that I think folks are just going to have to kind of work on, get used to, just like any new app you get. I've not played with it. I don't have it, because we don't have all of this set up yet. But generally speaking, it's an exciting addition to the LPS software, and it'll be an exciting addition, we think, to families to say, okay, now I've got a good sense of our routine, and if the bus is running behind, or if you're wondering where your child is after school, you can keep an eye on that and say, okay, it looks like they kind of got a little behind on the pickup for those K4s because some other things may have gotten slow, or maybe it's just slow go on some road conditions. So for that, I think that's an exciting one that many of our parents will probably be excited for when the information comes out. Again, we don't have this right now. We are in the process of purchasing it with the company. Just if you're listening at home, if you're starting to look for your Stop Finder app, we don't have it yet. We're getting it, and it takes time to set it up and integrate it into our system. So part of this purchase is having the company help us set it up in concert with our IT department, but then also come in and train the folks in our transportation department on how to use it properly, how to quickly maneuver it. It's going to take time. I hope everybody gives them a little bit of grace. They've been using the same software for many, many years. They know how to use that software. This is going to be new. So just like all of us who end up getting a new operating system on our laptop or our desktop, and we say, wait, my icons were here, they moved them, kind of thing. They're going to need some time to play with that. So we've got those items that are for the parents excited about, probably our staff excited about. Some of the other items that we have something called a trip finder. It's really like for field trips, athletic runs, etc. Can help our folks, again, do that by hand. This will then, in a quicker manner, help create what the most efficient, what driver, what bus, who's going to be back at that right time, et cetera, et cetera. And another nice part, and when we were going through the review on it, was, and unfortunately this happens, and it happened this school year, we might be short a driver or two, and we had to cancel a bus. We know that we did that in advance for several weeks, and even one morning we had to cancel a bus. I think we had to cancel 2 buses on that morning. Our team does that. That transportation office does that by hand. They know the routes, they know the stops, they know the buses, they know the drivers, and they work on that. And it takes them quite a bit of time to redo, to say, we're removing a bus and a bus driver. That means other buses have to go pick up those students that were going to be on that route that was canceled. With the power of the software, it can give you your best plan. In other words, instead of by hand tearing apart the routes and putting them back together, the software can say relatively quickly, you should remove bus C and have it be picked up by these 2 buses and these 2 routes, because they're the most efficient to catch those bus stops because they were going to be the closest coming by anyway. So that's a very powerful item for us. And we hope that doesn't have to get used a whole heck of a lot, but that's a really powerful item, because I know, talking with the staff in the department, they say it is intensive work. The second they come in and the first person hits it by 5:15 in the morning is sitting there, and when they know, they have to start doing that right away and start tearing apart those routes. So that's a big deal for the staff. We also have something called Wayfinder that we added as a package. Wayfinder is for the drivers, and specifically for us as we venture into this software, it's for drivers who might be substitute drivers or one of our regular drivers who has to drive a run that's not their regular daily run. Most of our bus drivers, they get used to the route, they know where they're going, they know where their stops are, they know all of those things. When you have a person who may be a very well-trained and long-standing driver take on somebody else's route, well, it's exactly what you think it would be. I'm not used to this, what are my stops, etc. So we're buying a handful of tablets, and on those tablets, we have to also get cellular for them, because just like your phone, if you're dead on your cell service and you're not on Wi-Fi either, it won't work, right? You want to get the updates onto those tablets, and it can give turn-by-turn directions to drivers that might be unfamiliar. It might be a new driver we just trained, but again, they're just learning the area, Livonia and Northern Westland. We can get them one of the tablets. Or when we have a bus driver, because we do have some that come in as substitutes, and we can hand them that tablet, and it's mounted on there, and they can have those turn-by-turns and all of the road condition items that pop up just like it does when we use our phones when we're driving around. So it's a very exciting, efficient, time-saving, and safety feature that we're excited for. And not to leave out our service department, as folks know, we are very proud to hire and employ our own mechanics, and they do an amazing job with not only the buses, but the rest of the fleet that we have. Because of course we have pickup trucks and vans, et cetera, in the maintenance department. So they take care of all of our vehicles, all the district purchased vehicles that are out on the road for work purposes. Now they're going to have something called Service Finder, which it is an item that can alert. We just have to put in basically the information that we want to keep, and it can give alerts to say, that item on the shelf is low, you need to order more, or that bus 72 has hit its mileage range, it should come in for service. So it keeps the buses and the vehicles on time. Now you can do that obviously just like we were doing routing, all by hand, but this is a way to gain efficiencies and get alerts for those types of service items in the garage. So that is something that we're very excited about. It's multifaceted. There's different pieces to it, and there's a little something in there that sort of touches all different ways, whether it's routing, whether it's field trips, whether it's parents, whether it's the service department, et cetera. And I do want to say that our supervisor, Vicki Simonik, who has been in the district for many years, really does lift heavy weights with her and the folks in the department, as does everybody who drives and the parapros that are on those buses, et cetera. This is a quote that she wrote to me. She was just writing this to me to say, this is my thoughts. I don't think she thought that I was going to read it in front of everybody, but now I'm going to. She says, we will be able to see all active buses on a large monitor. This will help us track every bus at all times. As we build the system, we will look at all school walk zones and we'll be able to update and make necessary adjustments. I mean, think about that. When somebody calls and says, where's the bus? They have to then get on the radio and call out to the driver and say, what's going on? Then so there's that lag in information. And what she learned when she visited other districts that are using this, it was eerily quiet in the transportation office. And she wondered if there were no students. And the answer was, no, the kids are in school. Why do you ask? She says, why isn't your phone ringing off the hook? And the answer was, well, ever since we got the software, we have the two-way communication on the app with parents. And even before they have to ask a question, they can get their question answered simply by, their main question is, how late is late for the bus? and they can see it already. So there's a lot of communication that we're hoping will go out back and forth in a two-way manner in a much more streamlined way, and actually helping both the office staff and parents not need to make a lot of phone calls to find out information, because the hope with this and what we believe this has been doing, based upon what not only the companies told us, but what others who use it, is that you can get your own information. You can be an informed person with regard to where's the bus, what's the next question. You can send messages back and forth, et cetera. So we're very excited about all of this. So the bus stops are going to get rebuilt. Folks might find out next fall that the stop that's been in the same place for their child for years has moved, because it might need to be in a more efficient place based upon the use of the software. So that should be something that people shouldn't be, it's not like we're gonna move something 3 miles away. We're talking about what's the most efficient street. Maybe it's coming off this street and going to the next one, because that's the best way to make that turn into the next subdivision, or whatever the case may be.
Terrific. Mrs. Acosta?
Thank you. So I think ideally, right, if everything goes through, we're looking at this taking effect in the fall?
Yes.
Okay.
So it takes, and that's actually, at this point, it's already February. That seems like a long time still, but remember, they do the routing at the end of this school year and into the summer. So getting a large district like ourselves, we're the 9th largest district in the state of Michigan. We have a lot of kids, we have a lot of buses, we have a lot of staff. So the goal is absolutely to be routing with it over the summer and to be ready to go for the fall. I just want to make sure we temper that with, we're even feeling a little bit rushed now, or a little bit behind, because it's all new and everybody's going to have to get it implemented and working seamlessly on the network, which isn't always, on the first try, but we're going to get this going. And we have that goal, because I know that Vicki and her team really want to be using this summer, this product this summer, to be doing the routing.
So,
that's the goal.
Okay. Thank you. I really love the integration of technology, and we know that, that really everybody's on their phones, and just the ability to see, it's the transportation version of Life 360 for parents. And so I think that's a wonderful, wonderful feature. I think also the ability for substitutes or bus drivers to be able to have that tablet that we talked about, where they can see if they're on a new route, that turn by turn. I think just that alleviates a lot of stress on our bus drivers, and we're looking to retain the ones that we have, and I think that's a wonderful feature. So I'm excited to see this
Agree.
in action.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Verdi. 2 questions, Mr. Francis. Number 1, do I understand there will be an app that parents will download onto their phone?
Yes.
That they can follow the buses if they so choose,
Correct.
right?
That's the stop finder.
Okay. Then on the service finder, I'm assuming that all the bus maintenance information is going to have to input into the system.
Correct.
So that then they will know, you'll have to put the parts inventory in so that it knows what parts we already have.
Correct.
And then the software will tell you when it looks like you need to replenish a certain piece.
We'll
of
actually set
inventory.
those limits. So if we want to have no less than 10 on the shelf, we'll have to put that in. If we want no less than 3 on the shelf, we'll have to put that in. And we'll put the information on the mileage, et cetera. Bus 62 has this miles, and we've done these items. You have to get that first baseline, exactly what you're talking about, input it, and then once it hits the road, because it can run the GPS and know the miles and whatnot, then you can put those same limits and say, after X, notify us that it's an oil change, or it's a brake check. Or now our guys, we do that already, and it's a communication on paper between the drivers and the mechanics. The system they've been using for years,
this is going to replace that. So they're going to have to get used to some of that as well. And you're right, it's going to be work up front to load in that information so that then it become more seamless. And it says, bing, here, it's time for this bus to have this service, keeping it healthy, maintained, and working on the road. Or bing, you're down to, somebody just took a filter, now you're at the level that you told me to let you know, go order some more.
So you were talking about an upper limit of parts and inventory. I'm assuming it's also going to be set that there'll be a minimum pieces of inventory there, so that the last thing any of our mechanics want is the bus comes in, it needs some repair, and they go to the shelf and there's no part.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yep, that's why it would push you when you say, like the Ross, who is the supervisor, can say, look, we go through this a lot. I want to have at least a dozen on the shelf, or this is something I can only need a minimum of 3. And if it hits the 3, somebody takes it, and here's the human part of it. You can take it and not mark it in the system, but if we keep on that, then the supervisor will have gotten that notification and say, well, we just got down to 3 of these, you need to order more. And then that gives him the prompt to do so. So we want to make sure you can have all the systems of the computer in the world. If we as the humans don't do what we're supposed to do, we don't get all the benefits from it.
Yeah, I love this feature. I
Yeah.
think it's great. Thanks.
Mrs. Frank?
Thanks so much. So one other thing, when you were mentioning about the software will find the routes and figure all that out, we will have eyes on that to approve or not approve, right? Because I think one of the greatest things that we've been doing it by hand is that your staff knows there's not a sidewalk on that road. So even though that's the best place, or we can't have K4 kids crossing a major intersection or that sort of thing. Can you program kind of all those things in, or will they have to, at the end, will they have to eyeball it and say, this actually doesn't look good?
That last thing you said, I'm just going to say, it's like proofreading your paper before you sent it in or submit it or anything. You always want to do that. You always want to have eyes on it. And I think they're going to have lots of eyes in the early days of it because they're so used to doing it themselves that they want to see how this is comparing to what we've been doing. But I'll say this is part of, it's why it's not just a plug and play. We have to put in, the maps are great. They're current and they stay up to date, but we know for years on the east side of Newburgh, south of Churchill, off, at Joy there going south, there was never a sidewalk on the east side, but there's a sidewalk on the west side. So if you lived on the west side, it was walk zone, but on the east side, for many, many, many years, until not too long ago, it was a bus zone because there was no sidewalk. And then once it got put in, we had to mentally say, okay, we need to, those types of things have to go into the software and ensure that we know what our policies are, our distances, a sidewalk type of item is another. All of our policies and procedures, we're going to have to put that in there, and that's part of that big setup. So it's really, again, software is only going to be as good as what you're inputting.
Mrs. Acosta?
Kind of to piggyback on what Mrs. Frank was saying, I know that at the beginning of the school year, there's the PD for staff and for most of the teaching staff. Is there a dry run during that time for bus drivers?
Yes, drivers always come in before as well. They have their own PD. It's all like safety related and processes and procedures of the department, et cetera. And then drivers take the run that they have at the start of the year, and I think everybody knows that there's a bid in October, so there's that turnover in the fall, but they come in and they have a route, and they always drive it before school starts, before students come. So they have the opportunity to A, get familiar with it, and B, see if it's been to the best of their ability on a non-school day when there's actually students that you're picking up. They go, they stop at a bus stop, they keep going, and they try to see if the time that's been allotted is accurate. You never have that for real until you have the students getting on a bus or getting off a bus to really know how long it's going to take. But we do that in August before students come.
Any other questions or comments? I have one question. Will parents have the ability to view only their child's bus? I'm thinking security-wise. And will any non-parent, I mean, I would hope that a random community member couldn't hop on and just see where our buses are all going.
I'll have to check on exactly how it is built as far as, is it a password and you have to have something to, I honestly don't know how the app works. I've never had
Right.
it with me, so we can ask, we have a rep. Yes.
Looks like we might have,
I actually do use a very similar app for my own kids.
Oh, okay.
You usually have to enter a password.
okay.
It would that would make sense, but
Hang
I
on. Looks like
I
we have an
can-
answer
yeah.
coming, but hold on just a moment.
And our rep's is very communicative, so I'll send him something to confirm all this as well.
Okay.
This makes all the sense in the world.
I've used an app that's very similar to track transportation for my own children, and you have to log in with your password initially before you're able to access any of the routes, and you can only see the route for the child that you have information on. So it doesn't let you view multiple routes or, any other pickups or drop-offs. You only see where your child is in relation to school, home,
Good.
and their
That's
stop.
exactly what I was hoping for.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that it's a very similar option. Of course, Mr. Francis will get you that information, but knowing how those systems work, they've got it down to a science.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, these have been around for some time, these apps, so I think they've probably kind of run through some of those
Yeah,
things.
I've had
but
some
I'll-
parents asking for them.
Yeah, I'll get,
Now.
yeah, I'll reach out to our rep.
And then, is there any, I love the whole thing. The one thing I would like us to be able to, at some point, afford more of, and we talked about this at the study session last week, more of the tablets with the cell service so that more of our drivers can have them. Because I'm sure those things change and it takes a little bit of time to get used to your new routes and so forth. Do you know if, I know that they're quite costly, which is why we're starting with a small group of them and we're going to pilot that portion. Is there potentially any grants or any security money from state of Michigan that we can utilize for this? Any safety security money?
We can, I don't know if that would fall under the 31AA for safety and security. It'd be an interesting question to look into that. But as you said, it's not only the tablets. If it was just the tablet, that'd actually be easier. It is the
Right.
ongoing cost of the cellular that you need for it to be utilized. So we are going to start off with a dozen of them, which is a handful more, close to twice as many as we
Right.
originally talked about at the study session. We want to get a sense of how they work,
How many
how
are you
folks
being
use.
utilized?
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, because we certainly don't want to buy, a one-to-one and find out that 3/4 are sitting on a shelf. Yeah, that's one thing I would like us to get some follow-up on and see if we legitimately need more of them as we go along and if it's cost prohibitive or if it's not, or if there is any other way to fund that portion of it. But thank you for doing this. This is going to answer so many, it'll reduce stress on the part of our staff and of our parents.
In the long run, I keep saying that because it's all going to be new, and
Yeah.
I know when I get something new, I stare at it, I throw it.
Yeah.
We got to figure these things out. But I think once we get over that big
Right.
learning curve hump, and we settle in,
Yep.
it should be something that increases communication
Yeah.
and
In real
gives
time.
gives
Yep.
folks the information that they're seeking that puts their
Yep.
mind at ease.
Absolutely, because there's nothing more stressful than your kid is on a bus and you don't know where they are. Even if they're in a building, you know where they are, but alleviating parent stress on this one is going to be huge. So thank you for all the work you've done on it.
Thank you. No, I actually have to thank the folks, Vicky and Ross and Kevin and Tim.
Yes.
They all did quite a bit. They dragged me along with them, but they did a lot of the early heavy lifting, and then we did a lot of reviews together. So I really appreciate them and all the input they had from the tech side and the transportation side.
Yeah, they're the ones who would know best what may work. So terrific. Thank you. Any other questions on this item? No, we will be voting on this, correct?
No.
Oh, we're not
No.
voting on it?
No, we're not voting. This is just informational. Mhm.
Okay, because it's professional service.
Mhm.
Okay, all righty. Okay, thank you. Then LMC furniture item is next, and that is item 5B.
The LMC furniture, you have a layout in front of you that we put together. The furniture is something that we've done each year going into around this time of the year, going into the upcoming summer bond work. The LMC furniture for the buildings for 2025, you have some layouts, some colors in here shown. The design has been created in that design with French associates was done at each building with principal, media specialists, and whoever else they wanted to have on that team. Mrs. Oquist and I sat through also like what the colors they chose, et cetera. And then the designer from French ran through the different types of materials, how they went together, et cetera. Most of the items that you see, and we'll flip through each of these together, but the items that you see, most of it is probably familiar. One of the things that is different this year, simply from the monetary standpoint and the purchase standpoint, is we're putting the bookshelves into this furniture purchase. So if you see the dollar amount total, it's higher than it was the past few summers because those were split out. But in the end, they come together. Just this year, it was decided, what was the reason? Do we have a reasoning why the bookshelves, we didn't have this delay this year like we had in the past?
Yeah, we had
pulled them
impacts
early.
to deliveries in previous
Yeah.
years, so we had pulled ahead bookshelves knowing that it's standardized across the district, so we had to pull those ahead. With lead times normalizing now, we're okay to package them up, so they're in one recommendation this year.
And if you've noticed as we've gone along, the finish on all bookshelves are the same building to building. You can pick one up out of Stevenson and take it over to, Emerson. They're the same finish, they're the same styles. The ones against the walls are the same in the buildings. The ones that are in the middle of the floor, no more than 48 inches high, they are the exact products. But the furniture, while similar in many places, the colors are different, the utilization's different. Some schools have items that other schools don't have. There's just a large repertoire of items that French Associates Designers has brought forward. You want to run through them real quick, just kind of point them out?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see the top if you how it was stapled together. The top one, that's Buchanan. You can see the red outline in the overall map of the building, the areas that we're talking about here. So we've got the larger rectangle that's in red is the LMC, and then we have the smaller rectangle next to it is the Idea Factory.
Some of these finishes have changed, so we can run through these, you're familiar with most of them. But just so you know, some of these, where it shows, one color pattern on the seat versus the back, some of those have changed.
You have a variety of soft seating, and we also have the tables at all the Idea Factories are similarly put together. So if you look at the top page, you can see the tables with the chairs around them, and then some of the tables are the like octagon, maybe they're hexagon, and the wood tables, the block tables. We have those in all the Idea Factories. Very similar layouts. When you get into the Flex Classroom, again, very similar layout up to the right there. We have that's going to have a nano wall separating the Flex Classroom from the rest of the LMC. That's the large glass panels that accordion and open and close together. We have obviously a lot of blue running through the palette over at Buchanan. And generally speaking, we've got storage also at the upper left of your sheet for the Idea Factory, and lots of shelving for storage of the books throughout the LMC itself. K4 schools you often get the lily pads, for reading time for the little ones. So that's something that you wouldn't notice in, say, a middle school or a high school, et cetera. We get those there. And we have the media specialists circulation desk. That's if in the lower left, you can see that it's a curved item with a book return with it. That's been in all of the schools as well, along with we've purchased the newer carts for book, moving books back and forth and sorting. Is there anything, Mrs. Oquist, that you wanted to point out? So if you turn the page, we're with the grant gators. They went more with they've got the color palette going with the green and the yellows. I think they're trying to get their gator pride on with some of the colors here. And very similar items as you look, you can see again on their Map It grant where we have the big rectangle is the LMC, and they have a rounded LMC. It can be difficult. We've got a couple of those across the district. Grants was particularly difficult to figure out, but they did a nice job, I think, of putting in. I know the media specialist is excited about this. They from an architectural point of view, they created the office for the media specialist off to the right there, and then as it skinnies up on the curve, that's an area that they want to have for the little ones to have their reading time. So it's a nice little, kind of just puts them in an area that's like a little bit of a cozy space. And then they have the lily pads they can sit down on. The media specialist can have the reading time with them. And they've kind of just have that little corner. And like you said, cozy is kind of the word that comes to mind. Again, beyond that, you see very familiar tables, chairs, storage. Idea Factory storage is the same in each of them. And in fact, we asked, after having a few years now with the Idea Factories, the media specialists in many different schools have said the same thing. I need more storage. When we went through, the board had a tour when we were over at Hayes and we were in the Idea Factory. You see how much supply, how much product they need for the class. So there's lots of bins, there's lots of buckets, there's lots of bags of things. So we went back and talked to French associates and said, okay, they've lived in it and we've seen what the need is. Let's add some more storage into the Idea Factories. So did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to add, so it is modular furniture that, when we designed initially, we didn't want to overcrowd it and, once again, live in the space. And now we're at the point with the modular units, we can add on to it seamlessly and just get the new pieces ordered. And there's custom pieces and different shelves and drawers and other things they can select from, knowing that we left room for expansion. That's the time now we're going to try and move forward with that.
Next page is Johnson. Actually, the next couple pages are Johnson. And you'll see they have a color palette. They've got some brighter colors, and then they've got the muted, they've got the grays and more of the earth tones, all sort of mixing together, coming together. And they have, as you can see, just kind of that open top above air, some nice niches and nook areas for students. And I think this is going to be a fun area, that upper left, that when you come into on that door to the left side and make another hard left, it's going to be a really neat, they got some panels up, kind of a place that students can hang out, work together, and have a little reading nook area. And that's what the principal, Mr. Traub, was aiming for. Wanted them to have a little bit of a spot of their own. Again, not a whole lot of differences on the items specifically, but it gives you a flavor of the color palette that they're going for.
Mrs. Frank?
So on those back little spaces, they look great, but is there, are there windows or a nano wall here? Just because I'm thinking 5th and 6th graders, 5th and 6th graders to be in a room all by themselves. It doesn't look like there's any like windows or anything.
So in Johnson, the LMC is in the middle of the building. So there are no exterior windows. There's some,
Supervision.
yeah. So when you look here, as we're looking down at this, you can see that the flexible classroom you can see the row of the tables and chairs closest to you. That's going to have the nano wall across it, okay? And then if you go straight over to that niche area, the two panels, those are like I believe they're a sliding sound attenuation. Yeah, so you remember in Franklin, we had those sliding sound attenuation. They're soft, they absorb the sound, but you can open them or close them in that one area. Very similar to that. So they're showing in this picture closed up, but they could be open as well, and it doesn't completely close up. It just gives it a little bit of that cozy again, because it really is a little bit smaller, like a reading area or a couple of students team up. So that's all still open. That Idea Factory is closed up in all of our schools, right? So you can see in the upper right, the rounded or the wood tables that are rectangular and whatnot. That's the Idea Factory there. That's pretty standard for all of the schools, Mrs. Frank. And then the middle is actually, if you've been in Johnson, it is a pretty big central spot when you walk. There's doors on either side to the hallway, opposite hallways. And it's a big open area that they're having where you can see that the book stacks are all in the middle there. They've got some soft seating around it. So it's really a combination of the hard with the soft, the books with the seats, etc., right through that big center area. So there should be some decent visual eyeballs on students for the media specialist, because the office area, she'll be out in that center spot. And really, every media specialist I've talked to over the years just keeps saying the same thing over and over. I'm not sitting in my office. So that's when they have that circulation desk where you can see, even though it is mobile, you can see where it's originally laid out here. They're either there, or at elementary, in our K-6s, they're literally with the students because they are teaching that class.
And Mrs. Franklin, the Idea Factory, the students wouldn't be in there without an instructor. Right. So they would be in there, and then that collaboration area, if you look at the black and white rather than the color rendering, you'll see that it's, those panels are layered. And so those are, you can generally see through those, or you can slide them. So they're not solid. I think on the colored version where you're looking at the aerial view, it looks like it's almost like a wall, and it really isn't. Those are panels that slide within themselves. So all of that area is either to be utilized by perhaps another teacher with their class in there, in which case you can close that. If that was not, then those would be open.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. On the picture for Johnson, on the right side, there's something called a walk-up station. What is that?
That's the walk-up station is in every LMC. That's the area that has the desktops and a printer on it.
Oh, okay.
We had some piece of furniture basically made for them in each space, and so it's the best name we came up with. It is a walk-up station. It's got a couple of desktops and a local printer, and then we had them custom made so that there's a little door with a key, so they can the media specialists can keep reams of paper or whatever, and be able to lock it up, and instead of having to walk away to find more paper, they can keep a couple packs in there. Did you have anything on that one?
Nope.
Okay.
Mrs. Frank?
So are our students, for students to print, like, can they go to a desktop and print?
There's a I can't say it. The desktop, two of them. It's built where they're staggered, so one's a little higher than another. So one for either ADA compliant or just a shorter student, and then a little higher one. Two of the generally two desktops, and they have, like I said, a local printer, and you could go over to it and print something out or look up something in the catalog, or whatever the case may be. They're for students.
All righty. Any other questions on this? All right.
Okay. And then our last one is Churchill. If you flip two over. What's that? Oh yeah, if you're wondering, the second page for Johnson, we are putting some new furniture in the front office there. When it got done in the 13 bond, I don't believe that the furniture is done because they don't match right now and it's a little off. So one of the requests on, when we go into a school, we say, these are all the standard things that are happening in this building. Is there something that you see that you want to talk about? And that was one of the items to say, can we sort of open up and standardize our office too, where families come in to visit?
Okay.
Thanks for the reminder. And the last pages are for Churchill, obviously a much larger space than the other three that we were just looking at. This is an area that's been reimagined and redesigned in many ways, both physically trying to raise the ceiling up a little bit in areas that's possible. There's a lot of steel up in that ceiling. But also just from the point of view of the media specialist and the administrative team, there's going to be an area that is going to have the esports room, and that's super exciting and a unique item. And then you can just kind of see the layout of the furniture. It's, if you're familiar at all with Churchill's LMC, it's a big space. It really is a big space. And right now, when you look at it, there's a lot of tall wood bookshelves. It doesn't even show as large as it truly is when you empty it out. So we've got quite a bit of soft seating here, different booths and workstations around. Again, we're high school students. You're familiar with Stevenson. You're familiar with Franklin's LMC. They have booths. They have places that, high tops, et cetera. Just a lot of the furniture that students can move around or staff can move around. You can put a couple of different classes of students in here, like a couple of teachers can bring their class down. We definitely know that Mrs. Casada, the principal at Churchill, wants to do her staff meetings here. So we wanted to make sure that the flex classroom, when you open up that nano wall, it's currently a computer lab now that we're taking over and going to have that be the flex classroom, and it will flow into quite a bit of this furniture as well, so she can get her whole staff in this area to have their staff meetings after school. So a lot of this has the forethought of both for the students and for the staff and for whole classes. So the idea being we had to reimagine it because it's such a different physical layout versus Stevenson and Franklin, which are very similar to each other.
Comments or questions on this one?
And again, no Idea Factory at high school. This one, it is very exciting. This is going to be a neat one because they did a lot of extra work on Churchill just simply because of the design of it and the way the ceiling comes down around it, trying to get a little bit of height in that space.
Got one quick question for you. I'm seeing three book stacks.
No, there's a lot more than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I know we're scaling down,
Yes,
I know
no,
one
no,
is
there-
electronic, and I get that, but that looked like a small.
No, there's much more. She was really trying to get the furniture to show those layouts.
Gotcha. Okay.
And just to clarify that, similar to previous years, French has worked well with each specialist to understand what the book counts are, what the circulation is. We
Right.
check to see what's getting circulated, ask them to clean out where needed and get rid of those that have been circulated.
Right.
So we've not reduced it without discussion. If it has, it's been an agreement that we still have the capacity that everybody's looking
Yeah,
for.
and on the final
When-
page,
when you go-
Mrs. Burton, on the top left, on the final page, those are all the book stacks.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you see that in the black and white.
Kind of going toward the left.
And then even next to it, there's a somewhat
on the very
colored one.
last page.
3 pages of Churchill. Yeah. I think on that first one, the designer wanted to really focus on the furniture and the seating that was being placed there. But as Mrs. Oquist is pointing out, that last page shows it quite well. And the flex classroom.
That makes much more sense. I know we're scaling back, but yeah. Mrs. Rank.
Is this media specialist the most excited about this new?
They're all very excited about everything that we're doing in their buildings.
Any other comments or questions? All
Do they all
right.
have cage lockers? I didn't see the lockers in other ones. Do the high schools have lockers?
Lockers?
I mean, just, it says cage lockers, like a couple.
That is likely for the esports.
Oh, yeah.
So there is.
That makes sense.
That portion of the room will not be used full-time during the day. It's part of the program, but also in case it's not being used, it locks it up to secure those devices to make sure they don't walk away.
That's just as a reminder for you that the workroom, the current workroom that's connected to the LMC at Churchill is very, very large. And so they're taking a piece of that, and one side of it will be the e-sport with its entrance, and then the workroom would just have been shrunk down, which is pretty common in each school, whether it be a K-4, a 5-6, a middle school, or a high school. Workrooms are shrinking because it's not the same utilization of them as it used to be when you had all of the physical items that you had to come in and work with.
All righty, any other questions on this item?
I do have one note, just for the recommendation, we didn't go over the numbers, but it is a total recommendation of $1,345,000. That does include a contingency, similar to Mr. E2's purchase. This is a consortium or contract purchase we're going through NBS as typically done. I just want to note one thing, that our contingency last year, we are finalizing some numbers. We're likely returning between $60,000 and $70,000 from last year's as well. So that contingency is there. We do have finishes to final select, so there's some ups and downs throughout the process, but we did pretty good last year. That'll go back into owner contingency as well. But monitor the same way, that it is a contingency we track throughout with the team.
Okay, great. And conversations we've had before, but in case the public may not have been listening in at that point, especially with our LMCs, the furniture really takes the place of some of the construction.
That is correct.
So, I mean, some of the furniture makes a pseudo wall, if you want to be, as an example. So those, we expect the furniture numbers to come in higher for our LMCs than for our classrooms.
Yes. Yep. And this says, we have checked with not only French and NBS, just double checking unit prices from other districts. We're buying a lot of furniture right now and others. So we do that check internally to make sure everything's aligning, quantities are there, and then once we finalize the finishes, we finalize the PO and get these orders out. So that's in process right now, and we should be set. Once approval, we'll get everything on order.
Excellent. Mrs. Frank?
Did you say what the contingency was?
We're carrying a 5% right now for $63,421.
Alrighty. Any other comments or questions? Alrighty.
I would ask that this would go on to next week's voting.
Yes, for the voting meeting.
And I know you asked about that, Mrs. Frank, earlier, and what I would say is an example of this is we just met last week to get updated designs from the architect, and from the designer, not the architect. And we actually chose some different fabrics in that meeting, or shifted where something might be utilized on one of those serpentine couches rather than maybe a small chair. And if there's a slight difference in price between fabric A and fabric B, that may account for that. And so while we're bringing this to you, we do know what furniture we're purchasing, but those finishes may shift the cost just a bit.
Alrighty. Any other comments or questions? All right, and this will be on our agenda next week for a vote. Next item is item 5C, bid results for installation of field lights. Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much. This, we're picking up a little bit from last month's conversation with regard to the lighting at the stadiums of the 3 high schools. We have Airport Lighting out of Luther, Michigan as the low responsible bidder. They were, in fact, the low number, but also they've done work in the district in the past. I think they did it through some bond work. I was talking to Mr. Weber. Airport Lighting's done work with other districts as well.
They did the scoreboards at the stadiums in 2019, I believe. They were in district and performed well.
And we have a recommendation for them at $181,934, which was their bid amount. We certainly will come to the board with a contingency on that, because if they start working and something is needed, we'd want to have a few dollars on there as well. But the idea here is to, if the board is approving of this, that we would get Airport Lighting under contract to work on all 3 of the high school fields. I know, just as a side note, the board has asked in the past couple of meetings that we had this conversation about the Musco lighting, about ancillary lighting around the area. Today's what? So I think Friday, we had a meeting with the ADs, the principals, Mr. Lau, Mr. Roberts. We all got together and had that conversation. Everybody's on the same page. We've got the ADs already know in advance areas where they've got issues, whether it be there is something there, it just is no longer working, so then we can get out there to fix it, or it's just a bare spot, it's barren of light. So they're all making a map and denoting areas on the map around that area of the stadium, whether it be, and we have done other items. There's conversations about how we put lighting under the Churchill grandstand, made a world of difference. Kids aren't congregating under there anymore, things like that. And then other areas where we all just kind of shook, nodded our head and said, yep, that's a spot that we need to get to. So everybody was super positive, just didn't take different tacks at how to do them. Some of them might be new lights that need to come in. Some might just be wall packs, which are items that we have on buildings where you just put the right to the against the building if it's nearby. That could give us some light. What we don't want to do is, we had a great conversation about the new lighting not tipping into the neighborhood. We don't want to flood the neighborhood with lighting all the time either. So we're going to try to walk that fine line between, at events, having appropriate lighting so people are not tripping, there's not dangerous areas, and so kids aren't getting into little areas to hide in dark, etc., but having appropriate lighting to accommodate the stadiums at all three high schools. So it was a really good meeting, and everybody's kind of got their marching orders, and we're going to wait on the maps from the ADs, get that in the hands of our operations and facilities and maintenance folks, and start working from there. And so the plan would be to try to have at the fall of '25 and that season when we come in next year, just to have those places looking fantastic.
Excellent. Comments and questions on this one? Mrs. French?
I'm hearing, because I was confused, so we already purchased the lights.
Correct.
This is just the installation?
Just the installation.
Okay, so for people, anybody listening thinking, I thought you did that last month. This is just the installation, we've already approved the
Yeah,
purchase.
and so that
Okay.
number is for all three buildings.
Yeah, okay.
So we got to divide that by, it's not exactly divided by three, there's differences, but generally speaking, if you're thinking about it, there's three different spaces they're going to go. And we're going to obviously have some of these done. Somebody's got to be first, right?
Yeah.
So one of the schools is going to, they're not going to do a light at one school and then come back around to all the others. They're going to hit one school. We don't have that order yet. The company is waiting on us to tell them that the board has approved this and that we have a purchase order for them. And then we can start having those conversations about getting in the spring, what their timing would be. But overall, we have good confidence that we're aiming for the new season for fall of '25, and then crossing the fingers to say there's going to be a school that's probably done in the spring and has their new lights.
Oh, that's exciting.
With the new lights versus the areas that we are doing on our own, for lack of a better term, is there going to be consistency of light color?
The lights that we're purchasing for the stadium itself are definitely specialized lights.
Okay.
We're going to be putting just traditional white lights in other areas just to light up spaces that might be dark.
Okay.
So we generally go with LED for anything new, but the lights that are going to be on the stadium poles are definitely different than what you would put elsewhere, because they're specialized lights to
Right.
work with the software and change colors and do all of those types of things.
Okay, I just didn't want it to look like a hodgepodge of different lights going on, but we'll go with there. Okay. Any other comments or questions? No? Alrighty. We are now on to 5D, purchase of dust collectors for LCTC.
This is the fun one. That's why we've been holding it back for a little
Now
while. Okay, let me get back over to here. So the Livonia Career Technical Center, Mr. Martin is the construction trades teacher, and they have that construction trades classroom. There's not a dust collector in there. So typically and historically, a wood shop, a typical wood shop at a high school would have a dust collector because you're creating and emitting additional sawdust, et cetera. So we have, we know that Churchill will need theirs replaced in the near future, but LCTC's construction trades classroom doesn't have one, period. A little bit of history on that is the room that today is construction trades was originally a welding room many years ago. And even after it wasn't a welding room, it wasn't even the construction trades classroom as it is configured now. They had a different space that eventually became the large group room at LCTC in the building. So they eventually migrated into that space, and they've been there for years now. But we needed properly, there's a handful of items. We had a good meeting earlier this school year with the principal and Mr. Martin, the teacher, and Mr. Lau, Mr. E2, and Mr. Roberts, Mr. Crockett from maintenance, and we said, what do you need? What are the things? One of the big things was a dust collector. It just isn't suitable to have a bunch of people in there and not have the dust collector. Plus, we have HVAC going into this room. You don't want to have additional dust without some type of mitigation on it. So what we have is, we've gone through Gordian. Gordian, it would be akin to going to interior environments like Mr. E2 brought to you and saying, we have bid out these items and we can get you what you need. So they have the materials and the contractors that can come in and do this project. So if you take a look through the quote that was in your packet, what you'll see is the contractor is Allied Building Service Company, and they're located in Detroit. So the resolution that the board would see on something like this would be for Allied, not Gordian. So I just didn't want to have a confusion. So Gordian would be akin to also saying, like, we use the NJPA consortium or something along those lines. So they get the contract. They've done that work of bidding out the projects, the materials, and the service, and then we're able to do a quicker turnaround with regard to going to a one-stop shop, and then they say, here would be the price for what you're trying to do, and we'll bundle it together with the materials and the contractor, and then we end up having that, excuse me, that relationship directly with the contractor, and Gordian steps back.
Okay,
That makes sense, how I
it does.
try to lay it, okay.
So they did their due diligence. They
Correct.
did
That's-
multiple.
Yes, that's, yeah.
Because we
it's-
only have the one.
Correct. And this is, again, this is like when we come to you and say, NBS has bid these through these consortium contracts. That's where the pricing came from. That satisfies our responsibility for the bid. This is something that we don't often do. You don't see this often. I imagine districts that don't have the infrastructure and employee staffing that we have probably take this route quite often. I don't know how often you see that in other districts, but we're very fortunate to have people who are adept at putting bids together and then running through them and interviewing those folks, et cetera, like we did with airport lighting for the fields. This was just something we knew we wanted to get that ball rolling quickly, and we went through Gordian. Did you want any comment on?
No, it's similar to the, like you had mentioned, furniture or playground equipment, anything that's standardized, they can put this to use and makes it more efficient for districts that don't have the resources, so
Yeah.
I would agree with everything.
It's a fairly straightforward project. That's the beauty of it, is if we were doing something super specific to LPS, et cetera, like, we know that we're talking about designing and bidding out for the Stevenson Pool, the filtration system, and sort of all of the guts of that. It's a unique system, so we're not going to do something like this. We had our French under contract, and they have a pool designer under their contract to do the specifics, exactly what we need, because it's a unique system versus it's a dust collection system. It's a fairly standard item with electrical, et cetera.
Any other comments or questions on this one? And this will be on the agenda for.
Please.
Okay. Next item is 5E, purchase of hydration stations.
The hydration station is often better known as a bottle filler. This is coming from the Michigan Filter First legislation. We have spoken to the board about this in previous meetings and the requirements that we have. So to get ahead of this, Mr. Lau has gone through Ferguson Facility Supply, who we use for vast amounts of items to purchase. They're a very large company. This is where most of our custodial supplies come from. If we were to buy an air purifier, we go through them. When we bought the misting disinfectant sprayers, we went through Ferguson. We've bought refrigerators from them. It's a huge company with contract pricing, and you can see that it says the national IPA is on here. So that has satisfied our requirements to bid. So what Mr. Lau is doing is trying to get ahead of the game and ordered 40, I believe the number was 40. Yes, 40 hydration stations so that we can take possession of them in our LPS warehouse. And as we're installing them per Filter First requirements, we have them. So we're not going out and buying onesie twosies. We're going to grab a whole bunch of them, have them. This summer, we're actually working with French via the bond team in areas of the 4 buildings that we're going into, since we're already going to have electricians and plumbers and whatnot, have them do that work if we have to saw cut the floor in an area to get wastewater out, or if we simply have to take the old porcelain drinking fountain out and replace and cut a bigger opening, we'll have the equipment. We're going to have this. He also ordered separately the filters that will go under the K2 sinks. That was a much smaller cost, as you can imagine. They're just individual filters. He bought a bunch of those that were obviously way under the bid threshold and all the other items to have, because our team is going school to school and putting those filters in under those sinks and in the K2 classrooms. These are the big bottle filler with the traditional bubbler in it. So this is equipment only,
All right. Equipment only, not installation.
correct?
Equipment only, not installation.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. Comments or questions on this item? Nope. Alrighty, and we'll put this on the agenda for a vote for next week.
Please.
Alrighty. That concludes building and site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having
both.
me. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a
Guys,
good
thanks
evening.
for coming so much. And now we will go to the policy committee, and we will look at board policy IDAA, vocational education, with Mrs. O'Brien. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
back. Thank you for coming back.
Why, thank you for inviting me back. I am bringing an update to policy IDAA. It was vocational education program. We no longer use vocational education. We call it career technical education. This board policy is from 1988 and was reviewed in 2014. It was a single sentence that just said we shall operate a vocational education program, and we have updated that. So I would like to read that, please. The school district shall offer high school students opportunities to take career technical education, CTE, courses. Career technical courses provide students with the skills and knowledge they need for post-secondary education and careers. CTE programs will be offered at each high school and at the Livonia Career Technical Center. All CTE courses shall be organized in accordance with Michigan Department of Education Career and Technical Education standards and Perkins core performance areas.
Good, thank you. Questions or comments? Nope. No? Great, thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
This is first reading at the board meeting. Right. Yeah. Okay. The second one is board policy DG, depository of funds, and Mrs. Smith is going to help us with this.
Hello. Thank you very
Hello,
much.
ma'am.
So these are nice and short policies, the ones coming up just one sentence each. We discussed this last week, and I'll read it aloud for us. This board policy originally read, "The treasurer of the Board of Education shall deposit the funds of the district in a depository determined by the board." And I think the depository is just a little bit old verbiage, so looking to update that so that the board policy would now read, "The treasurer of the Board of Education shall deposit district funds in a financial institution approved by the board." And the other suggested change is updating the title of the board policy instead of depository of funds to be deposit of funds.
Perfect. Any questions or comments?
No.
On that one? Okay, great. Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
And that's also first reading.
Yes, thank you. The second one is, or the third one is Board Policy DH, bonded employees. Mrs.
Perfect.
Smith?
Thank you. This is another short one, another one-sentence one. The board policy originally read, "All persons connected with the administration of district funds shall be bonded in accordance with the law." And I'm proposing that it read, "All individuals involved in managing district funds shall be bonded as required by law." And please help me if I did not capture anything from our conversation last week. I know we had some conversations about the individuals. And that does, yes, and what we currently have in place, our insurance policy covers individuals, not just employees. So anybody that's involved with handling district funds. And I did check with a legal counsel to find out what is the law currently? What is our requirement? So we have a blanket bond insurance policy that covers, so we don't have to name individuals. But Dana Abrams from Clark Hill said right now there's only if you have a specific title of attendance officer that there's a current law on that. We don't have anybody with that official title, so at the moment we don't have anybody currently required by law to be bonded, but we'll keep that in mind. I'll file that away in case there's ever conversations about that, so, yeah.
I wonder if that's because that person may visit homes for truancy or
Oh,
something.
yeah, that could
I
be.
don't know,
Yep,
but, and never mind.
yep.
We're on something else.
So if that's the case, then should it say something in addition to as required by law, since there isn't a requirement for that? Unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying.
I think because it was original reading that will, in essence, follow the law. If we're required by law to be bonded, we'll continue. So I'm proposing leaving it in there because if the law does change and we are required to bond any employees, we would continue to do that. But I'm definitely happy to have conversation if other wording makes more sense.
Are you saying to take it out, Mrs. Oquist?
No, I'm saying we currently do this, correct?
We do not have any bonds that like specifically list myself or, anybody in the district, but we currently have an insurance policy that would cover us. So, does that answer that? I don't know if I.
So we're not really bonded technically.
It's technically the insurance, it's called, I'm trying to think of the exact verbiage, but they call it a blanket bond.
Okay, so that we are
Yeah.
covered then.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. Do we want to put in there something about being in accordance with insurance requirements?
And even that, we wouldn't be required to have insurance on it, but it makes financial sense for us to have it. Because insurance, technically, I don't know, there's probably, I can't speak to that of like what insurance is required and what's not required.
More thinking about what our insurance requires of us.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Burton?
We may want to remove as required by law because our concept here with this policy, as I read it, is all individuals involved in managing district funds shall be bonded.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there's not a law saying we have to, we're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, we might want to consider taking out as required by law. Because we're not saying we're going to do it to abide by the law and in the manner that the law states. We're saying we're going to bond our people, period.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, and I can, maybe if it doesn't read bonded, I could find another verbiage reaching out to our insurance.
Bonded is fine with me because that insurance takes care of that bonding.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying,
Well-
I don't want someone down the road to say, it's not required by law, we don't have to do that.
Yep, I follow you.
Right.
Is that where you're going with that? I think eliminating as required by law,
Or just something about, as fiduciary stewards, it is advisable, therefore we,
Mhm.
et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
Whether it refers to the insurance policy that essentially bonds as a group, and then if there are individuals that are required by law, we would do that in addition to it. But we do this because it is a good financial practice as strong fiduciary stewards.
Why don't I work on this, and then I could send a update before our regular board meeting?
Because it would go on for a first reading anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that perfect?
Okay. Good thoughts on those. So then we will move on to Board Policy DL, cash in school buildings. Mrs. Swift.
So I'll read, again, this is a one-sentence board policy. I'll read how it originally reads, and then how I am proposing we reword that. It originally reads, "The superintendent or designee shall be responsible to see that administrative regulations are established and carried out so that all monies and equipment within all the district facilities are safeguarded." And I'm proposing just a couple minor tweaks, but keeping the intent and spirit of that to be the same. We refer to our administrative procedures that go hand in hand with board policy, so that specifically is something I'm looking to update. So proposing that updated board policy read, "The superintendent or designee shall ensure the implementation and enforcement of administrative procedures to safeguard all funds and equipment throughout the district."
Any comments, Mrs. Burton?
Especially seeing as we're changing the title to saying safeguarding district assets, our property doesn't seem to be in here. Property meaning buildings and/or grounds. So could we change the last, or just add "and property" basically, so that the last sentence would finish up to safeguard all the funds, equipment, and property throughout the district?
Yeah. I know one other thought I had about, to capture that too, another word maybe instead of assets would be resources, to safeguard all. I don't know if you'd consider property as a resource. Maybe it's more clear to list property as you recommended.
I like assets.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like assets.
Yeah.
I think it's good.
Okay. Any other comments, or put this down for first reading on Tuesday?
First reading is fine
Okay.
with me.
Perfect, wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. And that concludes the Policy Committee. The Personnel Committee, Mr. McFarland is not here. Mrs. Burton?
We have nothing this evening.
Okay.
Nothing, Mrs. Otis?
We do not.
Okay. And the Legislative Committee, Mrs. Jarvis?
Thank you. There's a lot of legislative changes pending, and I also wanted to thank everybody who went to the EO session that was sponsored by MASB and MASA. That was very informational. Mrs. Oquist, are you aware of anything that needs to be discussed tonight?
Nothing that needs to be discussed tonight. I have sent the board a number of updates in the past week or so regarding the executive orders, regarding the budget recommendation from the governor, and then related items, so I'll continue to do that.
Just encourage everybody to try and stay on top of things, because it's changing fast.
Oh, yes, the change.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. And that concludes our Committee of the Whole meeting. Thank you much. We are adjourned. Thank you.